Okay, looks like it is time to start our meeting. So in the meantime, thank you so much for being here with us and a warm welcome to everyone. Now you'll notice this is set up as a webinar, and so there's a bunch of things we will go through to get you familiar with the setup. But firstly, hello, my name is Sanya. I'll be your host this evening on behalf of Transforme, and this will be a fantastic event celebrating, as everyone has mentioned in the chat, a great milestone for 10 years. Now, we will talk about that in a moment, but what this event is all about is the need to rise together. Now, just a bit of a brief on what that means to the founders and also to the panelists you'll hear from tonight. They all probably have a different perspective and an idea, and I will share that with you. But thinking of the power of community rising together, what that does to society, what that does to our organizations, teams, and most importantly to our clients as well. That's the theme for this evening. Transforme believes in rising together with clients, participants of workshops, leaders we coach, and their internal tribe, who they call transformers. We rise together. That's one of the things I personally admire about Transforme. It's the focus on collaboration, partnership, and community, and creating a space for dialogue that matters to all of us today, especially given how things have happened of late in our society. So Transforme needs no introduction, but for those of you who have just joined our Transforme community, let me tell you a little bit about this truly impactful organization. Transforme was set up 10 years ago. That is what we're celebrating, of course, today. You may hear the co-founders share their dinner table story, and I'm sure everyone's probably got something similar in their journey as well, of how it all began, with a passion, a belief that each person has in them to become their best version in a way that transforms an organization. You see, the founding members of Transforme had discovered through a series of personal adventures 3 transformational methods that actually drive lasting change in a learning environment, which is quite different to regular training methods. And that's what's become the foundation of what today is known as Transforme Lab, a blend of 8 methods that creates breakthroughs in the here and now. And that's exactly what I think we all need to hear about. That's how Transforme lives its purpose of enabling people and transforming the organization through its transformation-focused methods. The Transforme Lab, and coupled with world-class tribe of facilitators and coaches, makes that magic happen. You might have heard of people saying that magic happens in business. Well, this is a really good example of people that actually put that into practice, and you'll see some of that this session. Over the last 10 years, Transforme has partnered with 150 clients globally, including Google, Accenture, Adobe, Ericsson, United Nations, and many more, helping them transform their people, leaders, and teams. Today, Transforme transforms professionals in the way that they lead, include, synergize, and influence, which are the 4 areas of expertise. Leadership development, diversity and inclusion programs, especially focused on women leadership programs, team synergy, and storytelling skills. You'll notice on the agenda that was up earlier that there will be a small session on that storytelling today from Gatik, which is fantastic. With many global industry awards under their belt, including Best Results Based on Learning Solutions, Most Promising Workforce Development Companies, and Trailblazer for Diversity of 2021. Whilst the first 10 years of Transforme has been exciting, it's really the next 10 years that you want to watch. Well, it'll be transformational. For those interested in learning more about Transforme, head over to the website. The link will be in the comments below. That is transformelearning.com. It will be in the comments throughout this event. Once again, thanks for joining us for this inspiring event to hear these fantastic speakers and celebrate our 10th anniversary, 10 years of transforming lives. So while I'm quite personally excited to hear the speaker's perspective on these topics, that we have chosen, we have a lot in store for you. There are 4 items or sessions that you'll probably want to be glued to your seat for. So don't leave, stay where you are. There's lots to cover. And if you're at a standing desk, you can't be glued to your seat, well, we'll glue your feet to the floor instead, but definitely stay put. There might be opportunities throughout for short breaks to grab yourself a coffee, but where possible, you don't want to miss these little bits of transformational genius. First, we'll have a powerful and insightful keynote address by Vineet, Panchhi. Who will share his views in his own unique and unimitable style on transformation. There's a great one-liner coming up from Vineet as well. Then we'll have 2 very thought-provoking panel discussions, and that panel discussion is full of fantastic speakers you don't want to miss. The first panel will explore a critical topic: how organizations gear up for growth in a post-pandemic world, especially around balancing empathy and driving high performance. Anyone who runs an organization anywhere in the world right now could relate to that, and they feel the relevance. We have a very interesting mix of leaders for this one. We'll have Rourke, Director of Sales and founding member of, there it is appearing on your screens actually, Director of Sales and founding member of Nuago. There is also Priti, Shetty, the Chief People Officer at WeWork. You'll also have Sidharth Gupta, the co-founder of Tribo Hotels, and it will be moderated by Priess from South Australia, the director of the CEO Institute. Huge lineup of speakers, huge lineup in that particular panel. Now, we'll also have a second panel discussion. We will engage in an important dialogue on a topic really close to my heart: breaking the internal ceiling. So for all of the women in this group, or anyone from a diverse background or whatever it might be, is talking about gender equitable workspace, breaking the internal glass ceiling, challenging mind traps to build a gender equitable workspace. And this panel is an interesting and inspiring set of leaders as well. We'll have Pooja Banerjee, the head of people operations at Google. Joining her will be Kate Croser, the CEO of the South Australian Film Corporation. Joining early in the morning from Budapest, thank you so much for getting up so early. We have Maciej Fagasinski, Global Learning and Developing Member of the United Nations Refugee Agency. Moderating this panel, we'll have our very own Sandra, co-founder of Transforme. Well, look at that. What an incredible panel, and don't want to distract from any of the valuable content they will share in just a moment. Finally, right between those 2 panel discussions, you'll notice we have a 4th agenda item, a power-packed micro session on storytelling by none other than Gatik, co-founder of Transforme. For those of you who have attended Transforme storytelling workshops or coaching, you'll know you're in for a treat in this session. I personally have seen this session delivered elsewhere, and as a public speaking coach myself, it blew me away. Fantastic content. They're very good at what they do. We have an insightful keynote address as well, 2 panel discussions, a micro storytelling session as well. That's probably why you're going to be glued to your seats, no doubt. If you'd like to take a look at the agenda, click on the link in the comments section. You'll see specific timings for each session. There will also be some opportunities to engage with us, and we've made a landing page with all that information there. Should you choose to ask further questions of anybody on the panel, you can do that on that website. Engage with Transforme if you like what you see, or in general, just ask us questions about further programs and engage further. That will all be in the link that you see in comments. Now, you'll notice that the comment section has been blowing up already. Lots of engagement. Engagement is great. So don't forget to write a comment in there to encourage the speakers or to encourage fellow attendees. However, if you have a specific question after our panels, please use the Q&A button, which is along the bottom of your screen. So we'll use Q&A for the questions for the speakers, and we'll use chat to engage with each other and encourage the speakers in general conversation. All right, so it's my privilege to introduce and hand the mic to Transforme's co-founders, Sandra and Gatik, to share the Transforme story. While neither of them need an introduction, most of you here have probably come across them and experienced the impact that some call magic of their transformational work. For those who haven't, it's my pleasure to introduce you firstly to Sandra. The name of Transforme has to do with making transformation happen for yourself from within. And that's exactly what Sandra has done for herself. Enables her clients from within. From being a shy, fearful girl to transforming into an entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, and a world-renowned leadership coach, Sandra is truly an inspiration. Sandra has brought the Transforme solution and approaches that she has been trained on, and the mastery of that, methods like emotional intelligence and coaching, that now she enables the Transforme tribe in building and delivering solutions with those methods. In addition to the many hats she dons at Transforme, Sandra is a huge advocate for diversity and inclusion, and the brainchild behind, the chief architect, of course, behind Transforme's women's leadership program, Evolve. And that has been making waves across the world. Next, let me share with you this amazing person whose work is often described as magical by clients, of course. And this is one of the pioneers of storytelling coaching, in addition to being regarded one of the most transformational leadership facilitators, Gatik. TEDx speaker, winner of multiple L&D awards, and a true ambassador of Transforme's inside-out approach. As an entrepreneur, facilitator, coach, and solution architect, Gatik's key uniqueness lies in his ability to quickly understand his customers' needs and create solutions that have tangible value. This comes from his 2 decades of rich experience in the L&D space and his personal transformation work that enables him to intuitively understand people and behaviors. The key role Gatik plays at Transforme is the design architect behind each of Transforme's solutions, bringing his tri-area expertise of design and structured delivery, group facilitation using methods like the T-group methodology. In addition to this, Gatik invests a lot of time in the training and certification of the trainers in the Transforme tribe, and I love that he calls them a tribe. So without further ado, over to the transformational tribe. That is the dynamic duo, Sandra and Gatik.
Thank you, Sanya. You set the context so beautifully for the event. In fact, I just wanted to continue listening, didn't want to come up and speak. And welcome everyone who's joined in to celebrate this moment with us and to listen into the amazing panel of speakers we have coming up. I've been looking at the chat. It's so good to see a lot of you over here, and I'm so grateful that you made time to be part of this beautiful moment. I'm personally grateful to each one of you in your presence today, and also the presence that you've showered over us in the last 10 years. And I would also like to thank my team who's been behind bringing this event to life. Thank you, Transformers, Jagrati, and especially Amita for making this happen. You know, the name Transforme is about bringing shifts from within, taking ownership of your own evolution, constantly exploring outside your comfort zone, and through it all, truly transforming. And I believe as a company, as a team, we have lived this process for ourselves. Our mission on enabling people to be the best versions of themselves in a way that transforms organizations is not something we've taken lightly. We have applied each bit of that passion and fire behind this mission in ourselves first at Transforme, and in the process created meaningful impact for our tribe, our team, our clients, and the community. So what's our story? Let me share that with you. It all started in a conversation at the dining table 10 years back, a mission to transform 1 million lives. But even before that, how did we get to the dining table?
I'd been in the training space for about 12 years back then. This is about 10 years back. And about 10 years back, 12 years back, I went through this really powerful transformation process through a very powerful workshop in San Francisco, Learning as Leadership. And I experienced real breakthroughs while attending this session on personal mastery. And that one experience had such a huge, profound impact on me. First of all, at a personal level, it enabled me to make huge shifts in my life, in my behaviors, like quitting smoking, just like that, just like the drop of a hat, and quitting alcohol. At a personal level, what this experience revealed to me for the first time as a learning professional was that there were methods available in the world using which, within a training setting, you could enable real lasting change. Methods way beyond traditional classroom training approaches. These were approaches of group process work, group coaching, CBT, REBT, rational emotive behavior technique, and these could truly help people change and challenge their beliefs and make real lasting change happen. And excited with this new discovery and also frustrated with the status quo of things, I decided to quit my corporate job as a learning leader for a large American company 10 years back and start something to help people bring about similar changes that I had experienced. And like Sandra said, I came back home from work late one night and I sat at the dining table.
And around the same time as Gatik was going through his I had done everything except training. I had led teams in quality, in operations, and then I was part of governance. I even rolled up my sleeves with sales and business development. I have one of my mentors here in this session here who can vouch for that. But after my second daughter, I was in a state of feeling like I was getting into a deep void inside me. Nothing I was doing at work brought happiness for me. I couldn't connect the dots. It was not fulfilling. I knew that I was meant to do a lot more in this world, but I just couldn't find it. And that led to a lot of confusion and frustration, and also a desire to seek my purpose. And in that desire, I reached out to people who knew me well, getting their feedback on what they saw as my natural talents. And while they said what they did, out of 10 of them, 9 of them said the same thing, which was they said, you have a canny ability to listen to people and help them through their struggles. People come to you when they need clarity and they get it. And that triggered something inside me. I didn't quite know what to do with it then, but I held on to it for some time. Then in a coaching conference, the description of a coach connected with what I was discovering about myself. And so I enrolled into a coach certification course. And what a powerful, deeply impacting experience that was for me, to discover the process of coaching and transformation by none other than Peter Redding, one of the co-creators of the ICF competencies and one of the most transformational coaches I've ever met. I went in curious and came out with a skip in my heart because I had just found a career that aligned to my purpose. And I sat at the dining table that night where Gatik had just sat down a few minutes back.
That's where in that moment, with a very clear mission to enable transformation for people based on what we had experienced, Transforme was born 10 years ago. And, we were off to a flying start. What you see there is that initial home design logo with that butterfly, the age-old thing of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. Remember, this was 10 years back, and this was us working on our laptops and trying to create something at that point of time, right? No agencies, nothing at all. And, our initial work created great results. And we were blessed to have mentors like Dr. Prabhakar Kamath on our sides, who was so instrumental in lifting us to the space of getting Transforme started and enabling us to do many of the things that we do today. And, the word of our work spread, and within our third month, Accenture reached out to us, becoming our first large corporate client, and today one of our oldest clients. We've been partnering with them for over 10 years now in India, Australia, and New Zealand. The word was spreading, our quality was being liked, our approach was fresh. We were signing up new clients each week and growing rapidly. But there was just this one problem. We had set out to do transformational leadership development work, right? But the work we were getting was a lot more different, right? It wasn't the leadership development, deep transformation work that we wanted to do. We were getting lots of stuff around team building, communication skills, presentation skills, and we were enjoying it. We were loving it. But we paused at this point of time, and we realized that we may be moving away from our mission of doing this really deep transformational work. So we took a pretty big step and decided that we needed to get some and work on some senior leadership development work, and we got one contract. And we did what we did, and the program absolutely failed. Completely failed. It did not create the transformational impact that we wanted or that the client needed. I remember in that moment, there was a lot of disappointment, but soon that disappointment turned into a sense of fierce determination, really. And if this is what we wanted to do, we realized that we needed to strengthen our core. We needed to deepen our practice and our design. We realized that we weren't ready. And this was the process that then led us to invest the next 8 to 12 months, about a year and a half actually, deepening our methodologies. We got deep into T-group process work, group facilitation. Sandra got into Gestalt, neuroscience certifications, but more than that, just experimenting and experimenting and experimenting for over 2 years. And that's when it happened. Through this process of experimenting with a few transformational methods, the Transforme Lab was born. Our own homegrown methodology, our own unique blend, our own secret sauce that we took our clients through for leadership work, and it created magic. And not our words, our clients. We got our first large-scale senior development leadership contract with Flipkart at that point of time. It was just an amazing experience, with clients calling it a legacy builder and something that was changing their lives. What we had set out as a mission to do, we had started hearing it from organizations for the first time.
Yeah. And this was the time we were beginning to discover our niche, the leadership labs. We were recognized as deep specialists in this space. And this is where the next expertise area was born: storytelling, a personal passion of Gatik and a chance requirement by a client on this path, and the art of storytelling was born. Around the same time, while the tribe had grown, the two pillars of Transforme joined and continued to be the strong pillars. Luan Chana and Vivek Sundaram, most of you would be familiar with them. The next couple of years is what we call blissful chaos. As the word spread about our work, we were growing leaps and bounds, doing the work we wanted to do, serving our mission. A few years later, we set out to challenge ourselves again. The essence of Transforme: get out of your comfort zone, experiment, grow, evolve, and transform. So we decided to go global and set up our Australia office. By this time, we had 100 clients, some of the most aspirational companies in the world. We were the top of our game, and we knew we had to change. But when we decided to set up Transforme Australia, many people advised against it. They said, why would you want to upset the apple cart? Everything is going great. But we knew we couldn't get caught in our comfort zone. And we set up our Australia operations 3.5 years ago. And against all odds, we continued to grow and rise. In the third month, we had Google Sydney reach out, then Adobe Sydney, Ericsson in Melbourne, the United Nations in Europe, all this while we were scaling in India.
And around this time is when we, realized that it was time to do things differently. And we had built our tribe. We had expanded our team. We had invested a fair bit in technology and people. And we had a very, very exciting and fun team offsite in 2019. Now, the moment I say 2019, you know what's going to happen, right? And we had just invested a whole bunch in our people, in our tribe, in our business, in our technology. We had strategy discussions, and we felt really nice doing this offsite like a corporate, like we used to help our clients do, right, for the first time. And it was really good. And then we all know what happened. The pandemic, right? COVID hit us and it hit us bad. And just at the time when we had just put in pretty much everything into Transforme. And the first few months, I think it was like that for everyone. We really didn't know what hit us. And, we were quite dazed, quite confused, quite scared. But I wouldn't say quickly, but we started to do what we do, which is pivot. And that's kind of a catchphrase now, and move forward, right? And all of those experiments, because it was a mode of survival for us, and all of these experiments with virtual webinars and workshops over about 6 to 8 months actually helped us reinvent and challenge our own beliefs. Those 7 to 8 months got us to experiment with newer models and approaches. And we reinvented the virtual version of our labs, not just the workshops. Workshops we could do, but we never thought we could do our labs virtually. And we were surprised, as our clients were, when they started delivering spectacular, almost similar to live lab results. And I remember being quite shocked when we did the first one. I think it was for Publicis Sapient, one of the clients we really admire. And we were sitting back and looking at the results and listening to the leaders talking like, okay, this is really working out. This continues to work. And since then, there's been no looking back. We decided to reinvent and evolve again in this new world with an improved version of what we were doing.
A few years before the pandemic, we had started work on women leadership, a personal passion area of mine, with clients like the United Nations, Accenture, and Flipkart. Then in the new virtual world, Google had expressed an interest in co-creating a journey with us for their women professionals. And through that process, Evolve was reborn, a sharp, insightful journey for women professionals to fast-track their growth and transformation. As work grew, we included some more transformers to our tribe, handpicking world-class passionate coaches and facilitators who shared our purpose. And the tribe continues to grow globally as we speak. Being in the coaching business, we realize the magic coaches can bring to your lives. We have been blessed and honored to have great mentors and coaches like Dr. Prabhakar Kamath, Colonel Samendra Kumar, Dr. Yaron Ziv, and Mike Rourke, who have enabled us in this journey of transforming lives. We couldn't have done it without them and without our tribe. And as we gear up post-pandemic, let's rise together to a new world of hope, gratitude, resilience, and growth. Thank you.
That is absolutely fantastic. What an incredible opportunity to hear both of your stories and the start of what has been a huge transformation. Even for both of you on a personal level, I hear 9 days it took to break some major habits. That in itself, true transformation. And I also love, Sandra, what you called it, blissful chaos. I think that is a very relatable term for probably everybody watching this right now. You might have experienced growth potentially, or you might have experienced the hit that they were talking about as well. But there's such an incredible journey of change, such an incredible journey of transformation. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, both of you. That was amazing. Now that we've heard that transformational journey, I'd like you to think about some of the elements you've heard them share about their journey and some of the strategic steps and actions they took. Perhaps it could relate to you, and perhaps it could relate to your organization. It's been demonstrated over these 10 years for Transforme, the process creates immense value for the clients and their partners. Definitely a true inspiration. Now it's time for me to put the spotlight on our keynote for this evening for the We Rise Together event. That is Vineet Panchhi, calling himself a rolling stone. Now that is a story, I'm sure, so hopefully we'll hear it. Vineet Panchhi calling himself a rolling stone, constantly dabbling in multiple forms of storytelling through his writing, poetry, voice work, and filmmaking. Definitely a true storyteller by the sounds of it. Noted for his thought-provoking questions that bring forth uncomfortable but necessary conversations amongst friends, family, and society, he has slowly but steadily been making his way into the hearts and homes of people. Apart from various personal projects, he's been working extensively in collaboration with major brands to deliver messages of hope, positivity, and beauty. Also the founder of Word of Mouth Media, a boutique creative communications agency based out of Dharandan, India. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our online stage, Mr. Vineet Panchhi.
Thank you, and thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Gatik. What a great story, and thank you for your humility. You've transformed so many people and organizations. I'm sure a lot of us owe a lot more to you than we acknowledge, and congratulations again. For this keynote, I thought we should talk about why transform at all, and I'm not sure if we should pose this as a question, why transform at all, or just make a statement and exclaim why transform at all. And yet without giving ourselves a good why do we do anything? None of us have ever been able to identify or find our purpose and meaning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the 10th anniversary of Transform Me. I'm honored to present the keynote. I must confess, I quite like how Sandra and Gatik named their organization we are all celebrating today, Transform Me. And to deliver this keynote, that is what I really picked on. I write poetry and think in abstractions and metaphors, so please humor me for some time. The questions that have troubled us, and especially writers and poets, humans, forever are neither new nor answerable for everyone in the same way, nor applicable to all of us equally. But our questions may be common, and the questions are: how do I find happiness? How does happiness look to me? How far can I take pleasure before it becomes pain? Life is hard, suffering is almost inevitable. But how do I manage and how do I find meaning in a meaningless world? What is the point of it all? From the Doors, from their album The Soft Parade, I quote, "All our lives we sweat and save, building for a shallow grave. All our lives we sweat and save, building for a shallow grave. Must be something else, we say. Must be something else, we say, somehow to defend this place." So what is the goal here? And are these questions not already all connected? Happiness and pleasure, and how much of it is contributing to happiness, and how without pain we know we cannot recognize happiness. And to be able to find meaning, we must suffer. I mean, they all seem connected, and these are eventually part of the same question group. And then there are relationships, of course, with ourselves, our friends, our lovers, our kids, our families, our neighbors. And the basic mission does not change. We want to be loved, and we want to love, and we have no idea what real love is. And yet we are looking for it. We are asking questions. Hollywood-backed romanticism, hormones, and wishful thinking, none of this helps the cause of love or relationships, but we still keep asking these questions. And then there is knowledge and searching for what is true, what questions are important, what should we really seek, what is true. And the latest is, how about sanity? I mean, these are the big questions today. How about who we are? How do we even know as people and organizations? And eventually, even though we start at not knowing who we are, how do we become our authentic selves? We keep these questions alive and ask them till we arrive at temporary at best answers of our own and rejoice at having found answers. And then we tell people what we have found in these answers. This is what makes me happy. This is what I find pleasure in. This is how I manage suffering. This is what gives me meaning. This is who I love. This is what I've learned, and so on. And we let some time pass, and lo and behold, the answers start losing meaning, and the exact same questions are back, almost like a little game that we must play time and again. And we look at the board that we've been playing on and recognize it, but things have moved, and we say to ourselves, okay, I have seen these questions before. It seems familiar. I did figure some answers, but I think I need to ask again. What gives me happiness earlier has ceased to. How do I find happiness again? What does this new happiness look like? What gave me pleasure once has ceased to? So what do I do now? Life is still hard, only in a different way, but how do I manage this new hard? What used to give me meaning has ceased to, how do I find new meaning? And I know that these questions are all connected and have been before, and yet we need to answer them again. All our lives we sweat and save, building for a shallow grave must be something else we say somehow to defend this place. And each time we go through this game, we have a choice to continue to ask these questions or to stop, live with easier answers and stop growing. In my favorite movie, Jim Carrey's film, The Truman Show, like Truman, none of us choose our identity that we were born in and conditioned to uphold. Like Truman, most people we meet are acting parts that they have been asked to uphold, and we usually never get to see who they really are. And like Truman, we must get uncomfortable and face our demons in order to discover who we are and what the reality is. Be the star of our own show, hopefully, not somebody else's. Be authentic, question everything and everyone, including ourselves. And understanding that these questions we ask ourselves daily will make us uncomfortable. We do not like uncertainty, but nobody does, but we need uncertainty. We need change and challenges. We can stop questioning the matrix, like they say, live here or follow the white rabbit. Really, in not leaving our comfort is not leaving our comfort the ultimate act of growth. So the question now is the game of constantly questioning ourselves a game worth playing? If the only trophy we will get is knowing ourselves, is it worth the pain? Because after the games of the world have been played, the money game where the trophy is wealth, the fame game where lots of people know us, status, people admire us, the power game, hopefully we are the boss, the pleasure game, which feels good, the relationship game in which we're looking for love. And through all this, what stays with us is really us. This game of really uncomfortable questions, the same questions again and again about happiness and pleasure and all our lives we sweat and save, building for a shallow grave, must be something else we say somehow to defend this place. Again, we talk about relationships and love and everything else. So these are cycles, and through each of these cycles, when we brave the questions, we grow. The more often we ask these questions, the faster we grow. When we answer these questions with integrity, we grow in the direction of our potential. And when we know the importance of this game, we stop questioning why these questions need to be asked. The game becomes natural, we want to play it, and we want to play it often. These are rewards and trophies that make our life richer. And with each new cycle, the games become easier. And once we know that a richer life is possible, we choose the game ourselves. We tell other people about it and push them to try. We still do not like uncertainty, but we know we need uncertainty to grow and move towards our potential. Seasons bring in changes in trees. Leaves fall and branches grow and roots deepen and new leaves appear and the tree is bigger and stronger. Another season will do exactly the same. Leaves will fall, branches will grow, roots will deepen, new leaves will appear, and the tree is bigger and stronger. Trees have a natural tendency to grow. Cycles of this questioning that I just spoke about bring in changes in us. It makes us bigger and stronger and reminds us that growth is our natural tendency. The existential questions that I've been constantly hammering, we have encountered, and they will keep coming back again and again. How to be happy, how to get more pleasure, how to reduce suffering, how to have better relationships, how to recognize our insanities and grow from them. And all these questions have answers that start at knowing ourselves and becoming authentic and moving towards our potential bravely and making the choice to ask these transformative questions. We transform because we are built to move towards becoming better than we are today. So why transform at all is the question I've been trying to answer for myself. And I told you, I picked it up from the name of this wonderful organization that we're celebrating. All our lives we sweat and save, building for a shallow grave must be something else we say somehow to defend this place. I wish the team at Transforme and all of you participating today a very happy 10th anniversary of the great work the team has done and will continue to do. Thank you, all of you, Sandra, Gatik, and the team for helping us reach our full potential. I wish you all the best. And that's all I had to say.
Absolutely amazing, Vineet. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your stories. What a storyteller. I can tell why you're good at what you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so much for the congratulations. Some things that stood out from what we've just heard, and I like this statement: braving the questions means we grow. And the quicker we brave the questions, the quicker we grow. These challenging questions bring growth in us. That is fantastic. And I think it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily come naturally to people. So to hear it the way you've described it, hopefully that inspires our attendees to take on the challenge, not just be entertained by the poetry, but actually take on the challenge of embracing the transformation that you've described. Thank you so much, Vineet. Now that we've had a fantastic keynote, that's a great way to open our event. A fantastic way to open our event and to really showcase what we are about. Now we've got a, speaking of showcasing what we are about, we've got a video to share with you all, and it showcases a little bit more about Transforme, and it actually comes from the perspective of people who have worked with us, and they are absolutely fantastic stories. So I'll share that with you now before we get to our first panel discussion, which will happen in just a moment. All right, so share this one for you.
One word, if I had to put it down to that for Transforme, I associate with you is brilliance.
Think of it, it's the word passion. You know, having a passion to see people have the result of change is what comes out of everyone that I've had anything to do with in Transforme.
One word that describes Transforme learning to me, besides from transformative, of course, is elegance. Really true elegance. Both Gatik and Sandra, who I know over the years, have just constantly displayed this grace and elegance in everything they do.
The word that I have for Transforme is passion. Because if you have passion, you always find a way.
Growth. Growth for people, growth for organizations, growth for themselves.
Transformation. Yes, we transform lives, and that's why we are called Transforme.
Trust. Trust among the team, within the team, trust on Transforme, trust with the clients. Just trust that they will do, Transforme will do what is absolutely right for everyone.
Be transformative.
One word, which is impact.
My theme or my word for you is synergy, and my wish for you for 2022 and beyond, and the next 10 years and the next 10 years after that, is that you continue to build on that synergy that you build with your clients.
All right, hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight to Transforme's story, and especially those powerful, impactful words that were shared from each of the people that just spoke. Perhaps one of them resonated with you. And if it has, and you haven't worked with us before, or if you'd like to follow up some questions with Vineet, who had just spoken, feel free to use the Q&A section, or alternatively, in our chat box, you'll find that link. That link will go straight to our landing page where you can fill out a web form, and all of your questions will be answered personally by our team. So make sure you follow up on that. I like that people are already engaging in the chat and saying that their word is inspirational. So that's fantastic. Perhaps you took something from that as well. All right, now, while we have you here, we're going to keep moving on to our first panel. So while we prepare to bring the first panel up on our stage, we are bringing this topic here from this first panel about balancing empathy and driving high performance. How do organizations gear for growth in a post-pandemic world in 5 minutes. If you need to grab a coffee or some nibbles, please do so now. We are ahead of schedule by a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll give you, actually, we might give you just over 5 minutes. I'll give you about 6 minutes or so to grab a coffee, grab some snacks, and we will be back for our next session with our panel in just a moment. We'll be back with you very soon. Okay, welcome back everybody. I hope you had a good little break, got yourself some snacks, and you're all ready to hear this next session that's coming up. So what we're going to do is make sure that our panel are preparing for the session. So we'll get our team to prepare our panel to come on up. Now, for those who were here earlier, you would have heard a fantastic session by Vineet. Thank you so much for sharing your views and such delightful, in such a delightful manner. A lot of people commented in our chat box about how fantastic the poetry aspect was and engaging. And of course, the values of what you've just shared is really, really impactful as well. So it was insightful and uplifting. And I mentioned earlier that some of the things that stood out to me were about the challenging questions that bring growth for us from within. And sometimes I think we shy away from that instinctively, but it's such a good challenge that you've actually put that forward for us to consider now in a post-pandemic world, which is actually the topic we're coming up to in this section. I might just also ask Gatik, if you don't mind unmuting yourself just momentarily, and just perhaps share some of your comments and perspectives and thank the speaker as well.
Absolutely. I can hear my echo a little bit. I'm not sure why that's happening. I think that's better now. Okay. So first of all, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Vineet for coming in and sharing his perspectives on transformation and change in his own unique style that only he can do. So thank you for that. I'm really looking forward to this panel discussion because I think this is a dialogue that needs to be had around balancing empathy and high performance as organizations gear up for performance in the post-pandemic world. So yeah, that's pretty much it, Sonia. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know Paul. I know Paul to be somebody who really asks very, very interesting questions. And I know the panelists personally, so I know that they'll have some very unique perspectives to share. I've seen some of their journeys personally, and I know some of their approaches as leaders, which are really inspiring. So yeah, I've grabbed my coffee and I'm ready to listen to them.
Fantastic. I think I dare say you probably won't need the caffeine from the energy that'll come from the panel itself, but still, that's okay. Now, with the stage set there with some interesting conversations to come, I'll also encourage you to use the chat to engage with everybody who's attending, perhaps as a way of follow-up from Vineet, maybe put in your, a follow-up from the video that we showed you, perhaps put in your keyword that stood out to you the most, or the keyword that really aligns with Transform Me from your perspective. Use the chat box for that. However, keep in mind, we do have a Q&A box, which is also in your bottom panel. That is where we'd love for you to put your questions during this session. So during the panel, if anything comes to mind that you'd like to ask the panel, feel free to use the Q&A box. So I'm excited to launch this first panel discussion on balancing empathy and driving high performance. How do organizations gear for growth in a post-pandemic world? Well, the early phase of the pandemic pushed organizations and teams to shift gears. I'm sure everybody can relate to that, from thrive to survive mode. Leading with empathy became a key imperative for business leaders in the face of a COVID crisis. Conversations on employee well-being, mental health became a very high priority. In 2022, organizations seeking to reprioritize business growth are finding themselves faced with some crucial questions, including how do they shift back the focus to driving high performance? How do leaders and managers drive higher result-oriented outcomes while continuing to be empathetic? And how do we manage proximity bias and drive a growth mindset with a hybrid team? And for those who might not have seen a hybrid team, that's the fact that even here we have people all over the world tuning into this webinar in different time zones with different challenges. And so you'll hear a bit about that from this panel. They'll explore those questions with business leaders to better understand the way forward in finding the balance between empathy and high performance. I'd like to introduce you to the speakers whose perspectives you'll be hearing about. Introducing firstly, we have our first panelist, Connor O'Rourke. Connor is the Director of Sales and a founding member of Nuago, a strategic IT partner which helps businesses transition IT by aligning strategic business objectives with technology solutions. Connor has more than a decade of experience in the IT industry and has considerable experience in all elements of sales and customer service across market segments in South Australia. Now, I know not everybody is in South Australia, but some of the learnings that you'll have from Connor will definitely apply globally. Next, please welcome Priti Shetty, the Chief People and Culture Officer from WeWork India. With close to 20 years of experience in the HR industry, Priti Shetty is a seasoned professional with knowledge and expertise in the avenues of performance management, employee relations, reward and recognition, management, leadership development, talent development, engagement and retention. Priti has been instrumental in spearheading multiple initiatives to make workplaces inclusive and diverse, with special focus on the development of women. We also have Sidharth with us, Sidharth Gupta, from the co-founder of Tribo Hotels and Hotel Superhero. What a fantastic name for a hotel, by the way. Tribo is a technology-based hotel brand operating in the budget segment of the hospitality industry. Tribo is present at 700 plus locations across more than 100 cities in a network size of over 15,000 rooms. Prior to starting Tribo in 2015, Sidharth used to head strategy at Myntra, the leading fashion e-commerce player in India. Finally, please welcome Paul Priess. Paul is the South Australian Director for the CEO Institute, providing leadership development programs for CEOs, business owners, and of course, senior executives. For over a decade, Paul has been a trusted advisor across a diverse range of industry sectors. He's passionate about the role that culture plays in building successful and sustainable business, and is a highly regarded leader and mentor. A request for all attendees, keep the engagement and the questions in the Q&A section, the bottom button that you'll see, and we'll try to attend to those questions at the end of this session. For now, I'll hand over to Paul to kickstart this panel discussion.
Sandra, just allow a minute. We're trying to add Paul on the panel. On the technical end, we just need to figure that out. Just give me a second.
Sure, no, that's okay, that's fine. While Paul joins us, what I might get Sidharth, Connor, and Priti to do, earlier you saw a video that was all about the keyword that most people said aligned with them, that meant transformation, or what transformation meant to them. So what would your keyword be, that one word that you embrace fully?
So mine was actually on there, Sonia. So wearing a t-shirt, looking a little bit casual, but brilliance. Brilliance is the word that is absolutely synonymous with everybody that you deal with inside the business. It's really, it's contagious. When you're around these wonderful people that are so passionate about leadership, so passionate about people, it's hard to not get excited by the brilliance that they operate with. So that's definitely the word for me.
Absolutely. Brilliance is a brilliant word. I love that you brought that up in the video and also right here. Thank you so much. Sidharth, have you got a word that comes to mind based on that video?
I would say for me, it's probably, I mean, not just based on the video, but in general, when I think of transformation, for me, it's probably humility. Because I think that is the most essential ingredient for transformation to happen. If you're not willing to look at yourself objectively and transparently, you're not open for any kind of change. Right. So yeah, I think humility probably for me would be the word.
That's a really good one. And I don't think I heard it on the video, so that's unique. Thank you so much for sharing. Priti, what is your key word when you think of transformation?
I think for me, it's resilience. I don't think you can transform without being ready to, expose yourself to all the change and all the ups and downs, which ultimately lead to transformation, but you have to stay resilient through all of it. So
yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Okay, now, Sandra, just to add also, we now do have Paul on board. Paul, hi, can you hear us?
I'm here, I've been here the whole time.
Oh, hello, Paul. Well, you're now on the panel stage, which is fantastic. So now that you're in the right spot, it's your turn. I'll hand over to you to run this session.
Thank you for letting me in. And it's really good to be here. Look, given what we've all been through, no matter where we are in the world, we've all had quite a challenging last 2 years. So I think it's really important that we all think about how we as leaders operate. So in this session, as already been introduced, we're going to talk about, can we have a focus on empathy and high performance at the same time? Is it one or the other, or is it both? So looking forward to that chat. And what can we do as organizations and as leaders to get that balance right? So I'm going to go around the panel of the three speakers we've got, who have already been introduced. And let me start with Priti. We know the pandemic has led to a lot of companies rethinking about their office space, which in turn, I assume, has brought a lot of people to look at flexible spaces like what you offer at WeWork. Priti, I assume that's put a lot of pressure and demand on your business and your people, and for them, to really step up and perform. What's your view about, and perhaps your experiences in trying to balance performance with empathy? And secondly, are there any best practices that you can share with participants? Over to you, Priti.
Thanks, Paula. And I think it's a very relevant question in today's times. For us at WeWork, building a sense of community, whether that's for our members or our employees, it's at the heart of what we offer. It's at the heart of our value proposition. And the culture that we want to offer, whether it's our employees or our members who use our spaces, ultimately boils down to human connection, and that's enabled through networking. It could be through collaboration or just shared experiences. And this has been our core philosophy even before the pandemic, but post the pandemic, especially after people experienced such prolonged social isolation, I think this sense of community became a huge pull factor to get people back into our workspaces. Now, we are a young organization. We are just about 5 years. And for us, our culture is very much about driving high performance. This is reflected through our OKR process, where we set really wild and audacious goals. It's reflected in the way we manage performance on a daily basis, and also the way we reward people. So we clearly differentiate between mediocre and superior performance and through our reward practices. But we've always believed as a leadership team that high performance does not have to come at the cost of empathy. And for us, empathy, is a real-time exercise all year round. It starts with listening. We do that actively through engagement surveys, through one-on-ones with our members, our employees, and through also other forums like Access, which give access to our leadership team, our CEO. So we're listening all the time. And I think empathy starts with listening. I also want to, just because you asked about best practices, I just want to spend a couple of minutes on talking about some of those practices, which I think reflect our belief in empathy and practicing empathy, So I think we offer a hybrid working model, which gives our employees the opportunity to work from any of our 36 buildings across the country. And they have the choice to pick a building nearest to their home. Now, this not just reduces commute time, but also the carbon footprint, and sustainability for us is a core value as well. The second thing we do is we have something called Collaboration Mondays, where we ask employees to come into the office and at the HQ location for each of our cities. And that gives them an opportunity to meet their colleagues in person, to resolve conflict, to maybe set the tone for the month or the quarter, and just have those conversations in person and really build that network and that connection. Flexibility is what we do for a living, right? That's our business model as well. And I think hybrid working enables not just our members, but our employees to drive those business outcomes while also finding that sense of personal balance. The last 3 years, I think they've been difficult for so many people and so many families. And 93% of our organization is millennials. So it's a very young group of people. And we've struggled, right? We've struggled with transitions. We've struggled with isolation. And keeping that in mind, we offered this employee assistance program, which allows people to tap into confidential counseling services. And it could be counseling of any kind. We also introduced wellness leave as a broad umbrella. So, if somebody requires leave just to take a mental health break, they can just apply for leave under this category. We offer something called a workation policy, which allows our people to travel anywhere in the country and work from anywhere for about 10 days in a year. And finally, our product, our product is our workspaces. So if you've been to any of our WeWork spaces, the design itself talks about, gives out the message that we care about your well-being. And there's a lot of natural light. There are dedicated wellness rooms. There are plants. There's ergonomic furniture. We allow our members and employees to get pets in to the office. And we also, have gender neutral bathrooms. 75% of our buildings have a new mom's room to support, feeding needs after childbirth. So our spaces also, I think, reflect empathy in so many ways. And finally, I think over the last 2 to 3 years and through the pandemic, we've kind of build this very vibrant culture where we've got these employee resource groups, which are trying to make our spaces inclusive for various strands of diversity, whether it's LGBTQ+, whether it's persons with disabilities, whether it's women or parents. And our policies have also tried to reflect that spirit of inclusion. So we've included LGBTQ+ partners in our insurance policy. Our insurance benefits cover things like fertility treatments or egg freezing. We've also upgraded our parental leave. So if you're a LGBTQ couple, the primary caregiver gets the same kind of maternity benefits as women get, the 6 months in India. So we've done a lot to reflect empathy and inclusion through policies, practices. And, I hope that some of this gives you a peek into our culture and what we are trying to do at WeWork.
Priti, thank you. I just saw on the messages, wow, that's amazing, people are saying. And I'd have to agree with them. I mean, it's fantastic that you've got such a broad view of how to develop high-performing leaders. That it's not just about, are they ticking the boxes? I think we can all, and we'll come back to this as a group, I think, in a little while, but there is a trap that we become very focused on efficiency rather than effectiveness. And I think by all those things you're telling us about, the programs, the flexibility, the employee assistance that you offer really does support, and I assume you can back that up, that you've got an effective workforce, not just an efficient workforce. Thank you very much. We'll come back, I think, as a group and talk some more. But I now want to go to Connor. Connor, you're there, I hope.
I'm here, Paul.
Hey, there he is. How are you?
Doing well, mate. Doing well. And yourself?
Very good, thank you. So as people watching might gather, I do know Connor. We happen to be in the same town. Connor, as they said in the introduction, you're a co-founder and lead the sales for Nuago, which is a really vibrant, fast-growing and award-winning technology company. I mean, you've been recognised across a large number of programs, awards. I noticed you're a finalist in another one coming up in a couple of weeks, the Impact Awards. Good luck with that one. In your experience, what's changed for leaders in the last couple of years in the way perhaps leaders operated pre-pandemic or during pandemic and now? Do you think it has changed? And if so, what do you think leaders are doing differently now?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Paul. And it's fascinating to hear Priti speak on the way up, because in doing my prep, some of the things there, empathy beginning with listening. I think there's a lot of similarities there. So I guess the answer I'll give today, or the answers that I'll give, is really from that frame of a 60-person organization that's privately held. So might be slightly different in how it could be dealt with in a larger multinational style corporation. However, I think there'll be a lot of synergies with what some of the other speakers mentioned. So I guess being a leader through the last couple of chaotic years has been a very challenging and at times really lonely role, I think. So firstly, I just really wanted to say well done to all those leaders out there that are hanging tough and keeping their people and their customers at the center of their universe. There needs to be more of that. So the pandemic put power in the hands of the employee. And as we can read in numerous global publications at the moment, the Great Resignation is in full swing. So I think that a balance of empathy and performance is absolutely key now more than ever. I think it was definitely desirable and admirable in leaders for many years before the pandemic, but I think since COVID-19 has certainly lit a fire under this as a requirement to be a great leader, to inspire your people, and to really retain and attract the best talent. So with that exodus and much more of a transient workforce, if I can call it that, it's critical that leaders appeal to more of the personal circumstances of their talent. I think much more than previously. I think the war for talent wasn't nearly as fierce pre-pandemic, and the power really sat with the leaders in businesses. And I think that's largely changed in the last couple of years. So at Nuago, when thinking about this question, it really made me think of Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is something that our chairman of the board teaches to all staff members who join the business if they'd like to go through it. And it's really looking at habit 5 stood out to me, which is understand before you may be understood. So in that, the value of empathic listening cannot be understated. It's one of the biggest key takeaways that I think the viewers on here today should really check against themselves and in their own capability, because I think that can be one of the single biggest impacts for positive change in your business. So we have these 2 elements, empathy and performance, and in my opinion are certainly not mutually exclusive. You don't have to have one or the other, but rather are really trying to find a harmonious balance between the 2. And in the second panel discussion, you'll hear about the glass ceiling today. And in my preparation for today, I was trolling through the internet and looking at some things and trying to validate some of my thinking. And I stumbled across a post from an incredibly inspirational woman who's certainly broken the glass ceiling from both a gender and an age perspective. And I absolutely love this. It's from Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. It goes like this. One of the criticisms I've faced over the years is that I'm not aggressive enough or assertive enough. Or maybe somehow because I'm empathetic, it means that I'm weak. I totally rebel against that. I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. So I thought that was beautifully put and really hits on both areas of the discussion today for our 2 panels. So then what's changed? Work from home. But what do we lose with work from home? Can you be as empathetic over digital means? The distributed workforce and the shift to work from home is very clearly required to keep the global economy afloat. However, I don't believe that a full-time work from anywhere model can truly replicate what we can achieve face-to-face with another human being. A lot of great things can be achieved by using these amazing collaboration platforms like the one that we're on right now. However, I don't think that the biggest challenge that this causes is I do think that the biggest challenge that this causes is a lack of true empathy, as it's hard to have a relationship as rich over digital means. Trying to find authentic ways to touch base, to check in, and to genuinely inquire about that person's well-being. Don't wait for a structured meeting to have an interaction. These critical times call for us to be face-to-face with our people every single day, as much as is possible in the digital world that we live. I do believe in the last couple of years that there's been a level of apathy towards working hard or a long-term position in a company with the transience we've seen in the workforce. I think a lot of that comes from the fatigue people are feeling in their lives, which is one of the most common things I hear from people. I'm very tired, I'm fatigued. The pandemic has given me a lack of certainty in my life. The reality is human beings are better when we are growing and when we're performing. And the best platform that we can provide for our people to grow is fostering a culture of performance that's underpinned by leading with empathy and authenticity. Leadership for me is summed up in a pretty simple analogy. Every individual is like an individually keyed lock. And our role as leaders is to find that unique key that unlocks the brilliance, or that makes the magic happen that was mentioned previously. Leadership is an art, and I believe management is a science. Differentiation in this time, I think, is key. When previously you could be a blanket style leader with one size fits all, one size no longer even fits many. Empathy for me is all about getting behind the eyes of that person and literally feeling what it might be like. And once you get that understanding, that's when the magic starts to happen around performance. So it's my genuine belief that being an empathetic leader at your core will propel the performance that you're seeking. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this one, Paul, but I'll take a breath and hand the mic back to you.
Connor, fabulous. Great overview of your own experiences, your beliefs, your learnings. You mentioned the COVID habits that I know is part of the DNA in Uago. And as you said, all staff actually get some training on that, which is brilliant. You did touch on the last 2 years, how tough it's been. And, in my view, with the leaders I work with, it's sort of been the toughest leadership test of all time, or in our generation at least, because we've all had to deal with things we've never dealt with before. This uncertainty, and so it's put a lot of pressure on leaders. And then, as you mentioned, the fatigue. I hear it all day that the community's fatigued, but also the leaders are fatigued. So I'm really pleased you mentioned that it's not an easy road, but that's when people rise to the top. What do they say? Diamonds are made under pressure.
That's right.
So, and I think you guys are really diamonds. Well done. Let's move on to Sidharth from Trevo. Are you there, Sidharth?
Hey, Paul. Very much here.
Hey, good to see you. Sidharth, I imagine one of the industry, you're in the travel industry, and it's probably the sector that's been worst hit by the pandemic. We've been restricted. We haven't been able to move around. We've had lockdowns and people living in isolation. So I imagine that's been incredibly challenging for you and your team. But now I read that you've got some amazing and aggressive growth targets. You already added 100 properties in January in 1 month, and now you're moving towards 1,500. That's an incredible growth path, and growing pains, I'm sure, and one of them must be around people and around leadership. Of how do you grow like that after having such a slowdown in the organisation? Perhaps you've had to sort of rest the organisation, if I can use those words, or hibernate the organisation is a word that we've heard over the last couple of years. So how do you now gear up for high growth, and you've got to perform? I asked the question, you probably need to attract a whole lot of people. So part of this has to be about how do you become an employer of choice? So you've got performance. We're talking about, are you an empathetic leader, or as an organization have empathetic leadership focus, but also you've got to perform. So I'm really interested, perhaps you can share with us how you approach these things.
Sure. Thanks, Paul, for having me here today. Unfortunately, this morning, just before this panel, I was at a meeting where I had to unfortunately ask one of our employees to leave for poor performance over a sustained period. And therefore, being in this panel today on this topic has a renewed, deep personal connect with me. And it also highlights the fact that, even though today we are focusing a little bit more on what happened during COVID and afterwards, but it kind of reminds me that this balance between empathy and high performance is not something which is unique to some special situations like the pandemic that we went through, but really is something that, is important and comes into the limelight in usual course of business. It is a key ingredient of leadership on an ongoing basis. I firmly believe that there is no such thing as a choice between empathy or high performance, right? I think the two have to go hand in hand. There is a necessary coexistence between the two, and there is no such thing as making a choice as to whether you are empathetic or focusing on high performance. Because, I feel empathy in isolation of a performance mindset is actually sympathy, because you're then assuming that the people at large out there do not care about performance as much as you do, whereas that's often not true at all, right? Sympathy in itself is, I would say, irresponsible from an organizational perspective as a leader, and from an employee's perspective, it's borderline condescending, right? It is actually the collective desire for performance in an organization that makes empathy a powerful organizational glue, because you're saying that, hey, look, we all care for each other, and we all collectively care for high performance, right? So it's not that the leader alone is focused on high performance. Everybody wants progress and growth in their careers. And if you acknowledge that, and if you kind of treat that desire of progress in people with respect, then somehow this balance is very obvious, rather than you having to look after your employees in a manner which is somewhat top down or from me to them, right? It becomes much more collective in nature. Interestingly, before starting Tribo a few years ago, I used to work at McKinsey, spent a long time there. And McKinsey has a beautiful phrase that describes this coexistence when they talk about what McKinsey is as an organization itself. And they call themselves a caring meritocracy, right? And that's a beautiful description in my mind, which kind of sums up this balance between empathy and high performance, where you're not being lovable fools by saying, hey, look, it doesn't matter, we'll not focus on performance, we'll just try and be nice to each other. But at the same time, you're also not being jerks. You're not saying that, hey, it doesn't matter what's happening in your life. All that I want are numbers, right? So this beautiful mix of being caring as well as being meritocratic at the same time, I think that's exactly how this thing becomes real. So in our case, for example, just talking about the couple of years that we have had, which were indeed extremely turbulent, extremely demanding, particularly for our sector, we of course did a lot of things to be very cognizant of the situation, the circumstances that we were all going through, not just our employees. Again, it's not from us to them, it's something that we were all in the midst of. And we of course had a lot of these measures that most good organizations would have taken, including things like providing additional health insurance to our employees for COVID related treatments, switching to completely a work from home environment, which, by the way, for a field organization like us means a lot, because that pretty much means it's okay, stay at home, it's okay, you don't have to go out and do sales, you don't have to do operations, just be at home, be safe. We of course provided a lot of additional COVID related leaves for yourself, for your family members. But even in that time, we did what was necessary for performance as defined in that moment. So we had to put people on pay cuts, right? Everybody in the organization pretty much took pay cuts. We also had to unfortunately ask a few people to leave, right, at that time, and we did everything we could to support them even in that moment, because again, even though we were in the midst of the pandemic, performance, even though it has different definitions and different metrics that you're solving for, it's still relevant. So you can't say that, okay, it's COVID, so I'm being empathetic, and post-COVID, I will focus on high performance. Right? And then, of course, once things started to get better from a COVID standpoint, we shifted gears. We made travel mandatory, where we said that, hey, look, people who are in field roles, they need to head out, they need to travel to other cities, because we objectively believe things have gotten better, and you cannot forever be in this dormant mode. We made targets much more sacrosanct, and we kind of started revving the engine towards performance in a different definition. Like I said, it was performance earlier as well, but a definition which was much more focused on growth, on revenue generation, and so on. And what I've realized through this experience, through this journey, is that there are three very important ingredients of empathy. And those ingredients, to my mind, are patience, fairness, and transparency around the why. Right? I think empathy in itself is being patient, because you've got to believe that what you are doing for your people, with your people today, is gonna pay off rich dividends in the future, in the long term, right? So as you said, Paul, that of course it's important to be able to have a good reputation as an employer, to attract people. What's amazing for us is that because of the fact that we have had this patience, we have had this long-term focus with our people over the last 7 years, and not just during pandemic, as many as 150 out of our about 450 people are people who have come back and joined us after some previous rounds of having to ask people to leave in times when we really had to cut our losses, right? So patience is super important. The second one, fairness, right? People have to believe, and that's why I said it's not about us to them, it's about us together. People have to believe that you're being fair to them, that you are in it with them, rather than kind of picking them out individually, even with some difficult actions, right? So, for example, in our case, as I spoke about pay cuts, as founders, we took the biggest pay cuts in the organization, right? Our leaders took the biggest pay cuts in the organization. So people who were kind of, the more junior guys, people who were, at the front line, could see that we were being empathetic by truly feeling their pain and feeling it even more so than they felt. And similarly, when it came to going back out in the field and starting to do the job that happens on the ground, we were the first ones to start taking the flights. We were the first ones to start visiting our properties. We were the first one to go out in front of our guests and really role model and said, hey, look, it's all fair. Everyone is in it together, right? And finally, as I said, transparency around the why. We underestimate people's own maturity, wisdom, and ability to draw logical conclusions, right? So when we were taking some of these difficult actions, as I said, we were putting people on pay cuts. We were forced to ask some people to leave. We very transparently told them, guys, here is the situation. Here is the math. Here is the money we have left in the bank. Here is what the revenue situation is looking like with the pandemic. And the reality is that if we don't take some of these actions, probably we are all going down together and there is no return. I mean, then anyway, we are all in a pretty miserable situation. So here is why we need to do this. And here is why there is no alternative. And when people see that, you'd be amazed at how they become participants and co-creators of those decisions, as opposed to being the recipients of those decisions, right? And then finally, so these were the ingredients of empathy. Like I said, finally, when it comes to performance, I think there is one big learning we have had, which has been super powerful for us. I think when you're in this mode, when you're shifting gears from one phase to another phase, it's very important to change the discourse, to almost, in a good way, shock and awe people into a positive belief, a world of belief, to give them a guiding light, which is a positive one, as opposed to them being overburdened by this negativity, by this vulnerability. Rather than that, if you give them a BHAG, if you give them this big, hairy, audacious goal, and you say, guys, here's what we are now gunning towards, right? And here is now our well-deserved success, our well-deserved place under the sun. Let's go out there and achieve it. That switch from being worried, anxious and seeking empathy, to charging out of the doors and saying, let's go out there and achieve something, is achieved very easily. So we set the BHAG that, hey guys, doesn't matter, we've had 2 difficult years. Within calendar year 2022, we are going to achieve profitability and become one of the handful of startups to get to that milestone. And we are talking about it repeatedly. We are breaking it down into achievable goals. And that has just changed the discourse from, hey, what if there is another wave? Are we going to survive? What happens to me? To, okay, I'm going to lead the charge on this objective, and I'm excited about what this might mean for my personal growth. So just setting that big, hairy, audacious goal and changing the gears impulsively has worked really well for us.
Sidharth, what fabulous learnings you've shared with us. Thank you so much. There's so much there for us all to take in. You've got this dynamic business that's been through such a roller coaster. And I love the fact that you're now talking about positivity, and that's got your people motivated. I think we all know as leaders, if we turn up with a frown on our face, guess what? We set the mood.
I agree. You might have seen a question pop up. We will bring those
just
to you.
See a message. We've got someone wants to ask a question. Beautiful.
I thought perhaps we could bring those to you at the end. We've got about 4 minutes left for this panel, so we'll wrap up in about 4 minutes, and I'll bring you all the questions then.
Oh, you're going to bring the questions afterwards, not now?
Yeah, we've allocated time for Q&A.
Okay.
If there was anything else you were going to ask them, we've got about 4 minutes left.
Good on you. Thank you. I think, listening to all three people, there's just so much there that we can all take away and learn. There's brilliant learnings. And the conclusion, if I was trying to make a summary on all that, is that performance and empathy are not mutually exclusive. They're two things that have to go hand in hand. I think, as I said earlier, the leaders that focus just on performance tend to be short-lived. They don't bring people along the way. They can get very short-term results, but they don't create the right culture to attract and retain people. So it's brilliant. And I'd also encourage people, when I've got the microphone for a moment, I've been reading up on psychological safety, and it's a concept that's been around for a while now, but I think more than ever, more leaders are starting to think about that concept and, what does psychological safety mean in your organization? And I won't go down that path at the moment, but I'd make it as a recommendation if I could. Perhaps we can go to the questions then.
Absolutely, no worries. Now, I think that most of the attendees will probably find there's just so much valuable information there, and chat box was blowing up with such great edification for all speakers. But if any questions do come up, now's a great time to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom. And if we get to them, that would be fantastic. One that has come from somebody called Coach is being a task-oriented leader versus a people-oriented. Does empathy really matter in accelerating performance?
Would one of my panel like to respond to that?
Yeah, I see your mic go off. You go for it. Ladies first.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think it's binary anymore. I don't think it's this or that. I think both Sidharth and Connor kind of touched upon it before, but I don't think it's about choosing one style over the other. I very much think that based on the situation and based on the individual and based on the phase of your company, you have to jump in and out of different styles, and that's what helps you drive performance. I think even in the most difficult situations, and Sidharth kind of alluded to it before, where you have to, like, let's say, lay off people or downsize, you can still do it with dignity. You can still do it with respect and empathy. So I don't think we live in a world of, exact sciences anymore. I think it's blurred, and you just have to choose what works in the moment.
Thank you. Connor, you also wanted to contribute something?
Oh, I don't know if I can follow that up with anything that's of value, but no, it absolutely, again, with the lock and key analogy from before, some people are not going to open up really from a personal perspective or feelings. And that's not necessarily what empathy means, but it's providing that platform for everybody anyway. Having that consistency as a leader, one of the things I've always been taught in leadership is consistency is key, because people can then start to predict the behavior. So you do get varying roles, types of people, different backgrounds, genders, creeds, all those sort of things. So I don't think it's a necessity to getting high performance out of somebody, but it really does depend on the individual. But I'd put it to you that it certainly can't hurt.
Thank you, Connor. Well said. We've got some more questions there, have we?
Yes, we have had one come up actually from Gatik. So what I might get him to do, since he's a host, is I'll get him to unmute himself and he can ask you directly.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. When we were thinking about topics that needed conversation around leadership, this is a topic we felt that many leaders are thinking about, but there's not enough conversation around it. Because, and I'm bringing in an outside-in perspective as an external company that provides leadership and coaching solutions to many clients. Talking about performance in these times and has almost become a taboo topic for many leaders that we're talking to some leaders, almost as if we were thinking that, how can I talk about performance when people are going through so much? Or if I talk about performance, I may be seen as an unempathetic leader. So there's all this talk around empathetic leadership and care. And yet I sense in conversations with some leaders that there's a growing sense of frustration amongst leaders and other people around not being able to talk about or drive performance for the fear of, being labeled as an unempathetic leader. So, and I'm going to ask any of the speakers to maybe respond, because the question is really about what's your one-line message to people who are watching this? What's your one-line message around this thing around, do you believe there's this unsaid stigma around being labeled as a performance-driven leaders in these times? Has performance focus suddenly become not a good thing in this world? And for those people who may be sitting with this question but not verbalizing, is there a one-line or two-line response that you'd like to share? Anyone of the three?
I'm happy to chip in, Gatik. My one-liner would be rather a short one. Be courageous. As a leader, be courageous. I think it's a very cushy position to take, to say, hey, but what if I get labeled as something and therefore let me just avoid that conversation? As I said, if you're doing that, you're just being A, irresponsible towards the organizational priorities. You're running a business after all, right? And B, you're being untrusting of your own employees. Your people might actually be prepared to have that conversation. And you might be underestimating their own resilience and objectivity by assuming that they would be labeling you as an anarchist or someone by coming and talking to them about what you need to do together, not just, again, from you to them, but together as an organization. So be bold, be courageous, just go out there and have that chat.
Love that, Sid. Thanks.
Gatik, can I add to this? People, as an organization, you need to demonstrate to your people, what does greatness look like for us? As an organization, what is greatness to us? And for an organization to be great, it has to perform. And, to build high-performing teams, the team members need to know what they have to achieve. What's their contribution to the greatness? So that to me is about performance, of talking about what do we need to achieve? What's expected of me? How are you going to measure my performance? It can't be, I'm just here as, you're never going to talk to me about my performance, because I think that just loses people.
Great point, Paul. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. I love that we've all been able to answer this one. Now, we do have another question that has popped up, and we'll probably leave it at that one then. This will be the last question for this session. Rajesh has said, I see organizations swing between empathy to ruthless. Why does this happen in your experience, and will that change?
Any of the panel like to say something? I could.
I guess as I'm trying to reflect on it is people have an A style and a B style, right? Often when you see people in a stressful, under a pressure situation, they can operate differently to when they're calm, they're well slept, they've had their coffee, they've done their exercise or whatever it is that brings people their kind of homeostasis. So maybe, and again, not knowing necessarily the organizations that are being referred to, perhaps, and leadership can be a lonely place, as I mentioned before, and we tend to play in our own heads a lot. So I guess my response to that would be is just make sure you have a good support network around you, because you still do need an avenue to be able to confide in other people, to speak about the challenges as a leader, to really look at things from an objective perspective externally to what you're facing. So that, and the final piece I wanted to touch on from the question previous was, what happens if you don't? Okay, if you do, and if you focus on, okay, we're coming across as a highly focused, performant leader that only cares about that. Okay, that's one downside. But the biggest downside can be if you don't act at all. If you don't focus on performance, you're going to be having some much harder conversations that impact people's lives in a lot bigger way.
And not in a way, right? Thank you so much for the insight. Apologies to the panel that we've run out of time for this session, but what I would encourage all of the attendees to do is to message us on our website. That's the link that was posted in the chat earlier, which I'll get our team to repost. That's a great place to directly ask questions that we can feed back to the panel to answer on our behalf later. Firstly, panel, thank you so much for being with us, and moderated by Paul. You did a great job. Obviously, based on how the chat looks, there are so much engagement. There's so much interest in this. I think you've all hit the nail on the head. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Most welcome, most welcome. Now, that's just a taste of what's to come. This is a fantastic panel of people, and we have some more incredible things to come now. So keep the chat going. We've got lots of thank yous happening in there, which is fantastic. We'll get our team to prepare for our next session. Now, this is a fantastic session, but before we get into that one, in case you missed some of the highlights from this first one that just came up with our panel, some of the things that stood out to me, Connor used that quote from PM Jacinda, I refuse to think that you can't be both empathetic and strong simultaneously. Very powerful quote. And then leadership is an art and empathy is the key. That really points to how valuable leadership is, and especially training those leaders in your organization to embrace that empathy and to really lead from a performance mindset. The performance mindset was highlighted by Sidharth as well. Empathy in the absence of performance mindset is sympathy. Again, seeing the need to work with our leaders first. And I love that Priti's focus was on inclusion and that it's done on purpose. All of these leadership aspects is why we are here. Transform Me is all about developing those leaders in transformational change. So this is the best place to do that. And I'll see the link is there. Transform Me Learning link is right there. Go and check out what we do in regards to developing those leaders. Gatik can also tell you more about that, as he is about to get on our stage with a fantastic session that we like, which is storytelling. So here we go. Storytelling for our session from Gatik. This is going to be amazing, and I've seen him do this live at another conference. You might have seen some of this happen elsewhere as well. But if you see the value in connecting with your team, connecting with leaders and clients, storytelling is the best key. So, Gatik, here's an interesting thing about what you'll find here. The world has changed, and so has our communication, or it must. With so much that's happened and changed, one wonders, isn't it high time that we change the way we reach out, connect, and communicate with people? Regardless of your role or title, today you have a responsibility to inspire, influence, and engage your people and your team and your community. This is where mastering the powerful skill of storytelling will help you create a positive impact. You're about to experience a mini session to discover the power of storytelling, which is going to be fantastic, delivered by Gatik, of course, and taking your first step towards becoming an impactful storyteller. So Gatik dons two unique hats. He calls it his two dualities: deep leadership transformational facilitator and storytelling coach with equal finesse and impact. Today, you will see one side of his, the master storyteller coach, pioneer of storytelling coaching, and over the last year has focused on building his tribe of storytelling facilitators at Transform Me. So this is a fantastic session. Sit back, relax, and over to Gatik.
Thank you so much, Sanya. And thanks everyone for staying along and joining in, first of all. Really enjoying the conversations in the chat. Love the panel conversations. Sid, Connor, Priti, and Paul, thank you so much for bringing in so many insights. You know, I'm excited. I'm also a little nervous. I've been told that I just have 25 minutes. And when I start telling stories, I find it difficult to stop, which is the case for many of us as storytellers here, isn't it? But I want to give you a sneak peek into this work that we do. And I'm going to start off by sharing with you a little bit about myself. And I'd like to share with you, a few incidents from my life that have been quite instrumental in shaping who I am. And also connected to this event, why I do what I do, why we do what we do, and how that morphed into Transforme's mission. And both these incidents that I'm going to share with you are to do with the one person I've admired and looked up to the most in my life, my father, who I unfortunately lost about 10 and 11 years back. So my dad was a senior officer with the Indian Air Force, a typical image of an Air Force pilot that you can conjure up. Tall, 6 feet 2 inches, broad shoulders, extremely handsome looking man. That was my father. And obviously the genes went elsewhere. And, my dad was one of the most social, one of the most jovial, and one of the most helpful people I've ever known. And one of the qualities that stood off of for me, was his intent to help and serve others. And I still remember one evening, I was about 14 years old, and I overheard a conversation between my parents, and it was clear that mom was not very happy with something that my dad did. And I did what good teenagers do. I eavesdropped into the conversation, and I figured out it was about a new business partner of my father's. He was leaving the Air Force and getting into a business. So Mr. Call, and there were a lot of issues with him, and he wasn't pulling his weight in the business. And, he was traveling to our city with his family with all of this happening, and he needed a place to stay. And with all of this happening, my dad offered him to stay with us, with his entire family for a week. And that when there were issues in the relationship, and his partner's intent was unclear. And my mom was obviously upset with my dad, saying, why would you do that? And I still remember dad sitting very comfortably on the sofa, having that, calm, relaxed look of his, looked up at my mom with a smile and said, if I have the ability to help someone, I will. If I have the ability to help someone, I will. And there are numerous such instances when he displayed this beauty of his intent to help. And every time there would be a function or an event or a wedding in the extended family, my dad would usually be the first person to arrive, not so we could enjoy the function or the party, but so that he could help set up the place and all of that and get us to do that. And I never liked it that time, right? But now I realized what he was doing. In fact, when my dad, whenever he'd step out of home for grocery shopping with his favorite green bag, the lady staying next door would just peep out of a window, look at dad and say, hey, Mr. Chaujer, you're heading to the market. Would you mind getting some eggs and bread for my house as well? And give my dad some money. And of course, dad would oblige. He'd always get for her what she needed. And what used to bother mom was not that, why was dad doing it, but the fact that, why would you do it for somebody who's not reciprocating? And I heard them, having this conversation. She was saying, she never reciprocates. Why do you do this for her? And she's selfish. And dad, again, in his signature calm look, just looked at mom and said, because of who she is, I will not stop being who I am. And I guess somewhere this intent to help and serve rubbed off on me at an early age, which I realize now, didn't realize back then. And in retrospect, I can say it was perhaps one of the biggest reasons for me to become a trainer or to continue being a trainer, for the last 22 odd years. And that's really who I am. Someone who's driven by this real powerful urge within me to help and serve and enable other people. And that is what connects to Transforme's mission of enabling people to become the best version of themselves. So that's really who I am, and that's why we do what we do at Transforme. And thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share this. And as I share with you a little bit about my life through a narrative of mine, I'm going to take a moment and ask you to put down in the chat window, how did you feel listening to my story over the last few minutes? So if I can see some comments in the chat window, it'll really help get a sense of what are you going through as you listen to the story. So put down in the chat window, what came up to you? What did you feel? What did you think as you heard the story? Because very often when I ask, so I'll be looking out for okay, Salman says inspirational. Thank you, Nand Kishore saying engaging, real Pooja. Hey Pooja, good to see you here. And Pooja, you'd remember it from the Dhola Kuan Air Force Station days kind of a thing. And very often when I ask this kind of a question, when any one of our trainers narrates a narrative, and these are the kind of responses we get. How do you feel when you listen to a story? Many of you may be saying, I was able to see the story. I was able to relate to the story. I could connect. I could empathize. I felt engaged. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of what storytelling can do in such a short period of time, even amongst people who may not know each other. The ability to help build that bridge, the ability to connect, the ability to engage, inspire, influence is what storytelling can bring. And that really is the most beautiful and the most powerful thing that storytelling can do. My belief, and this is my conviction, and this is my purpose around storytelling, because I believe the world is becoming more and more transactional. Just think about it. Just think about interactions and conversations that we have with people. If you look at the last decade or so, last 5 years, last 2-3 years, a lot of things have become transactional. With our team members, what do we talk about? With our colleagues, what do we talk about? How do we talk? Forget work, even at home. What are the conversations that we're having with our kids, with our spouse? Let's go to our clients. How are we selling a solution or a product? What are we doing? And I believe my conviction is that this world is becoming more and more transactional in the way we have interaction, and we really have this opportunity in front of us to humanize interactions and create an authentic impact for a better world. And that's exactly what we do with our storytelling work. And I want to circle back to some of the things that I heard Sid, Priti, Connor, and Paul speak about and reflect on. And that was so powerful. And that's where storytelling really comes in. Because if you look at it, Priti, you spoke about the need for a sense of community, right? In today's world, you spoke about a need for a sense of community, and you spoke about how WeWork provides that. And community is about a sense of belongingness. Everybody wants to belong, wants to feel connected to something, to someone. Even more so in this post-pandemic world. I go to what Connor said about how leaders and people and employees, there's an increasing sense of loneliness. Think about yourselves. Haven't you felt lonely at some? I know I have, almost every second day during the pandemic, at least the first year of the pandemic, right? Not being able to meet your family, not being able to meet your friends, not being able to do so many things, increasing sense of loneliness. There's a need for people to connect, to have conversations, right? We need to appeal to people personally, is what somebody said. I think Sid said that. And, the need to inspire, the need to retain is really, really important in this world. And storytelling is the answer to that, or at least one of the answers to that, not the magic pill, but definitely one thing that we need to pick up. And you need to get your people to pick up as well. 3 perspectives I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share with you 3 perspectives, or I'm going to talk to you about why storytelling is so important from 3 lenses. The first lens is going to be from the lens of research and data. What do we know about storytelling? You see that there. Number 2, I'm going to talk to you about it from the perspective of neuroscience. What does neuroscience tell us about storytelling? And finally, number 3, the current world reality. What is that telling us about storytelling? What you see on the screen is a research finding by Carnegie Mellon's study in 2007, where they discovered through an extensive study that stories influence people 118% more than just pure facts and data. Now, you all know this intuitively, right? I don't need to tell you this, but it's interesting because it's very often our preconceived notions that make us think differently. I always tell people that we're all born storytellers who've just become shy or unsure of telling stories. You know what I mean? And very often it happens when I'm conducting. I recently had a facilitator, one of our tribe trainers, who did a workshop, and I was talking to him, and he said, these people, they're talking about, these were sales managers that we were training, and they said, storytelling is not going to work for somebody who's left-brained. And, he was talking about a client, said he's quite left-brained, very analytical, just likes data, likes Excel sheets. And, what do we do with stories there? Now, people who have this question are partly right, but just partly right. And the reason for that is because what we don't understand is that it's not about whether the question is not, do people like stories or not? That's not the question. The question is whether you're telling them the story that they want to hear, that they need to hear, that they like to hear. and whether you're being able to tell the story in the way that they like to hear it. Very often stories fail, or actually I often say that stories only fail in two situations. Number one, when you're not telling the right story. And number two, when you're not telling the story right. Every other time stories work. You've just got to figure out the way, the techniques, the process to tell stories with data, for example, or tell stories that are 30 seconds, not 30 minutes, right? And that is all possible. The second lens, from a point of view of neuroscience, we now know from brain MRIs and scans that when people receive information in form of data, it activates only 2 out of the 8 regions of the brain. But when people receive information in form of a story, it activates 7 out of the 8 regions of the brain, literally calling it whole brain activation. 7 out of 8 regions of the brain activated versus 2 out of 8. And, I don't need to explain this to you, you get it. I mean, just think about the last time you watched a movie. A movie is a great story, example of a story, right? You're watching a movie of a high-speed car chase and you're sitting down on your couch, having your popcorn, having your drink, and suddenly it's a high-speed car chase, the car swerves left or right, and you go like this. You're not even in the car, but the process is so immersive that you feel you're in it. Maybe while you were listening to my story, you felt that you were in it. Some of you may have, some of you may not have. That's the immersive strength of stories that's coming from the point of view of neuroscience. Imagine having that ability to engage your clients in an immersive process, getting them involved in you, getting them to be able to see things the way you want them to see things. That's powerful. And finally, looking at it from today's perspective, really the conversation we're having, we're talking about loneliness, we're talking about a need to belong. It's really so high in this current world reality, the need for people to connect. This is a study that we saw published recently about how much the need to connect is increasing. I don't need to sell you this, you all know this. And we're speaking to so many we're having so many conversations with so many people and organizations. We're talking about, things have changed and we no longer have offsites with our people. We don't have the water cooler discussions. We don't have those, team pizza parties and stuff like that, or we have them, but that's reduced. And therefore, things are becoming more transactional. And how can we connect with people virtually? And we often find ourselves coaching and helping our clients use storytelling in their team meetings, in their team interactions, in their client presentations virtually, because it works in a virtual environment as well, to build that connection, to humanize that entire interaction, which is refreshing, which is much, much, much needed, right? So those are the 3 big ones that I wanted to talk to you about. And the question really is around how can we get started? What can you do? How can you get started? And where do you begin with this journey? And I think everyone in us has it in themselves to be a great storyteller. Now, you don't need to attend training programs and all of that to become a good storyteller. It could help. But I guess my biggest appeal to each one of us would be to start challenging the stories that we're telling ourselves about storytelling. Because I often find myself telling people that it's the stories we tell ourselves that stop us from telling the stories we must. So stop doing that for starters. Let's build more human interactions, human connections with people. Of course, when we do the workshop, we've, over the last 10 years, had the privilege to do this work for over 100 clients globally. And we enjoy it every time because we're just able to see that change happen right there in the moment, right? It's really powerful once you grab a handle of that. And there is some science to it, but you can definitely start off just figuring out on your own and just starting off with your storytelling. And finally, in conclusion, I'd love to get any questions there, and I'll take a moment to address any questions that come in, Sanya, if I have some time, because I will wrap up in about 2 minutes. But we're really understanding the power of storytelling now more than ever, especially in this post-pandemic environment, with all the challenges and the realities in front of us, the need to balance empathy with performance and so on and so forth. There's so much that storytelling can do. And just imagine if your managers, your team members, your employees, you yourself could engage, inspire, and influence people in a way that makes them feel good. Just imagine what that could do. Just imagine what that could do to, your team culture, your organization culture. That just imagine what that can do to your team performance. Just imagine what that could do to the way your clients experience you and give you work and create that value for yourselves. Because we're really on a mission to enable people to become the best version of themselves in a way that transforms organizations. And storytelling is one of the ways that we've chosen to help people become the best versions of themselves and bring about a positive impact for the organization. So that's pretty much it from me, folks, on telling you a little bit about storytelling, giving you a little bit of sneak peek around how the process works, or at least why it's so important. We, of course, talk about the triple loop formula of storytelling, the 8 patterns of storytelling. There's a science to it. But I'll leave all of that for later if any one of you have any questions. I'm going to pass the mic back to you, Sanya. I know we have some time. I'm happy to take any questions or use the time the way you feel we need to.
Fantastic. Firstly, thank you so much for sharing. Even though it was short and sweet, there's just so much value there. And I hope that everyone in the chat agrees. Actually, there's a lot of people commenting here about how important it is to make stories relatable to the audience and an immersive experience. Obviously, you would know this is close to my heart in my organization as well. So this is very, very on point. Things that stood out that you said, obviously, not telling the right story and not telling the story right. Now, we've obviously just gone through such a turbulent time in business where the stories didn't always come across right. We heard from one of our earlier panelists who had to have the difficult conversation with some people around taking pay cuts and this and that. Now, obviously, these kind of changes happen to some degree in the heat of, let's call it, business war. And if you think back to medieval times, the way that a leader would actually encourage his team was by getting out in front of that whole army line and telling a story, engaging his people in order to have that action come to pass. So if I'm thinking about how leaders of old days have encouraged and inspired through storytelling, why is that challenging now? Why is it that this particular business storm we're going through is such a hard thing to message?
Yeah, I reckon that's a question that you're asking me, Sanya, in terms of reflection. And thanks for that. I think it's a beautiful and a very crucial question, because especially in critical times, especially in sensitive moments, it's really crucial for leaders to be able to connect at a much deeper level, because there's so much happening for people neck down when there is crisis, when there is challenge, which is not visible, but it's palpable. You know your people are going through something. You just can't see it. You can't touch it. You know there's something happening. And in that moment, if leaders are going to stay neck up and just talk very transactionally, it's not going to help. I could have the most inspiring speech, but if I'm not connecting people here, and if I'm not connecting authentically, and just going to see a bunch of nodding heads because they want to nod their heads, and just because of maybe the power play. But and the best example of using storytelling in critical times, and again, I'm going to quote somebody, and I'm not quoting about this gentleman's leadership style or this organization, but I am talking about their storytelling ability. One of the best examples is what Stephen Allop, the ex-CEO of Nokia, did in 2011, when Nokia was facing a very hard time, as many of you are aware, in 2011. And Stephen Allop had the charge of the company that time, and he had to, drive a very important message in the organization, a very sensitive yet important message. And he decided to do that through a story. In such a sensitive environment, to tell a story to all your employees, to start a very sensitive message with a story. And that memo is available online for those of you who want to read it. You can just go on Google and type "The Burning Platform Story" by Nokia or Stephen Allop, and you'll get that entire memo. And it's so powerful. It's such a refreshing way to connect with people at a deeper level. And why aren't we doing it now, Sanya? Just going back to what I said, I think I believe that we just become too transactional without even realizing that we become transactional with our families, with our kids, with our spouses, with our clients, with our coworkers. And I think this pandemic has given us a shock, a shakeup, to realize the importance of relationships, hasn't it? For most of us, right? And I think it's time for us to recalibrate and bring back the human connection and humanize these conversations.
Good. And that's such a great tool to use with storytelling, because as people had said in the chat, it's so relatable, it's so memorable, but you're right, it has to be done right. And we've seen examples where the story hasn't been told right during these moments of crises, and that can actually be detrimental. So for anyone who's curious to get that messaging right, you can definitely contact Transforme and learn more about these storytelling workshops that they do. They are fantastic. We had a few comments and questions pop up. The first one actually popped up on our LinkedIn Live. So for those who didn't know, this is being streamed live on LinkedIn. And we had a question that came up there. How do you know that yours worked? That is, how do you know that your story has worked?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me take a moment to think about it. How do you know your story has worked? Let me take a step back and talk about the connection to that. Here's the challenge for communication broadly that I see a lot of leaders face, because when we're expressing ourselves to somebody, sometimes we get lost in our own heads. What do I mean by that? I've seen so many leaders standing up and making presentations or having a talk with their team, or giving an inspirational speech, but they're so caught up in what they want to say, they're so caught up in the script that they're not present in that moment to sense the room, to sense how the people are taking it. Because we're so lost in our own script and what I have to say. This is my key message. I've got to deliver it. I don't know. I'm not sensing what people are doing, how they're receiving it. So I guess the first way, and that's the answer, or my opinion, not the answer, to the person who asked this question on LinkedIn, is that, be mindfully present when you're expressing. And you can only do that if your storytelling is authentic. You can still have your script, you can still be prepared, but you've got to be authentic here, and you've got to be neck down, Sanya, like I spoke about. And I guess that's the first one. Some of the other things are easier to spot. It's worked when, it delivers the impact. It achieves the objective. To me, the three objectives of storytelling: engage, inspire, and influence. So by the end of your conversation or talk, if people are engaged, inspired, or influenced by what you want them to do, it's worked.
Yeah. Yep. Fantastic. I love that response, and I agree fully. I think being present also, you have a feedback loop there when you can actually see the impact that you're delivering through your story. Thanks to Gloria Joseph, we have a second question for you here. We do have time for it, so I'll go into this one. What are the barriers to following storytelling approach? And if it works, why don't we follow it? What comes in the way? How do we remedy it?
Wow, that's a lot of questions rolled into one. I'm going to take a stab at that, but thanks for asking that question, Gloria. Barriers to following storytelling. I guess the first one is what I already said, the stories that we tell ourselves. We're all born storytellers, so it's not something that many of us need to really learn a lot about. Sure, we need to get some training sometime maybe, but it's really what's happening here. That's the first barrier. The things that we say to ourselves, really, Gloria, around, my story is not going to work. This person doesn't like stories. I'm not a good storyteller. I don't speak well, yada, yada, yada. All of that internal dialogue. I think that's the first barrier to storytelling. The second barrier, in my mind, is telling the story that you want to tell rather than the story that the situation needs. Big challenge for storytellers. Now, unless I'm somebody who's got a message for the world and I'm doing a TED-like talk, which is different, then you say what you want to say because you've got a message to share with the world. But when I've got to, in a work context, when I've got to influence people or inspire people or engage people, if I'm just telling the story that I want to share because I like it, I feel inspired by it, I resonate with it, I love that key message, what about your people? What's going on for them? So a lot of times, I often tell people, what we train our people in the storytelling workshop is a lot more around story crafting than storytelling, because you're only as good a storyteller as the stories you have, isn't it? I mean, a story is not going to fall in your lap at the last moment. You've got to think about, how do I build a story? And that's a skill that people don't talk about. How do I learn to craft stories that are going to hit the bullseye? So those, to my mind, I'm going to keep it short. There's much more that I can share, but those are the two big ones that come to me, Sanya and Gloria.
Some of your training as well about crafting the content around those stories. That's something you're able to facilitate for leaders. Is that right?
Absolutely. There's a whole entire process, scientific process. There's 6 steps, 7 steps, 8 patterns. We've done all of that over the last 10 years. Absolutely.
Oh, you're good at it, obviously. Now, while we have 2 minutes left, we have 2 other questions. So we'll wrap up with these 2 for your session. Thank you to Pallavi Tandon on LinkedIn Live. There's a question that says, for someone who has many stories to tell, each meant for having the same impact, what is your guidance on selecting the right content in the stories we choose to tell when it is about our story?
This question could have only come from you, Pallavi. I'm so glad you're here and watching us on LinkedIn Live. You're a great storyteller, Pallavi, first of all, and you know it. And I get the sense of your question also because I've known you for so many years. Of course, a big challenge is, if I'm hearing your question right, it's about for somebody who's got a lot of stories to tell, how do you kind of keep your content right in the right moment and, you know, not get lost in that. And to my mind, it's really about asking yourself, whose need am I serving? That's the question I ask myself. If I'm getting into a meeting, into a conversation with a client or with a team member, and I want to use a story and I want to lead with a story, or you know, I want to inspire using a story, I check in with myself and ask myself, whose need am I serving? Sometimes it's my own need of my own ego to tell that story because it shows me in a good light and I feel good about it, yada, yada, yada. And that's not right. That's not helpful. And that could be a story that I'm deeply passionate about or I'm proud of or whatever it is, but it's not doing anything for you, Pallavi. Let's say if you and I are in a conversation, I've got to think about, where are you and I in the conversation? Where are you? What do I want happening between you and me? How would you best receive it? What's the most important thing for you to hear right now? What's the most important thing for you to hear right now? And do I have a story to arrive at that? That's what and I hope that offers you something, Pallavi.
Brilliant. Fantastically done. Now, we're right on time, so this will be the last question. Thank you to Vikram for asking, sometimes with business leaders, when we share a story, the logical or result-driven leaders may be like, oh, here we go again. How do we get around that challenge? Now, this is obviously talking about the different personalities and how they respond to stories. How do you get around that challenge?
Love that question. Was it Vikram who asked that question, Sonia? Was that the name of the person who asked? Right. Thanks, Vikram, for that question. Great question. A couple of things. Number one, in our workshops, my trainers and I, we talk about 10 golden rules of storytelling. And we train people on 10 golden rules. And the first golden rule of storytelling is never start a story by saying, let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
That's the first golden rule. And the reason for that, Vikram, is because the term story, sometimes in the corporate context, can get misconstrued, can get associated with fluff. So you say, I want to tell you a story. People are like, oh my God, how long is this going to go? Or you say, I want to tell you a story. The person, oh, he's going to faff around. I want to tell you a story. You say, oh, this person doesn't have any data. Oh, this person is trying to justify. You know what I'm saying? And I've seen that in certain cultures, stories is associated with, you know, just beating around the bush, which is not the truth. So number one, Vikram, the quick fix is never start a story by saying, let me tell you a story. Replace it by words like, let me share an incident with you. Let me share an experience with you, right? Number one. Number two, the kind of storytelling that you use in the corporate world and what we train in Transforme is a story is an RSI, which means a story is a real specific incident. Anything that's not a real specific incident is not a story to be used in the corporate world. We're not going to stand up there and talk about the tortoise and the hare. We're not using that in the corporate space. You save that for your TED Talk, save that for your inspiring speech somewhere else. And finally, you know, if you've got an audience that is more data oriented, and I know many of us have people who are more analytical and so on and so forth, there's a lot of work that we do around storytelling with data. I'd ask you, Vikram, to watch the brilliant TED Talk by Hans Rosling. If somebody from my team, Vivek, if you're here, if you can put the link and the name down there, Hans Rosling's TED Talk on using storytelling with data is brilliant. One of the masters, hugely inspired by him. And we also talk a lot about the skills that you need to do that. So I hope those three perspectives give you something there, Vikram. And thanks for that question.
Brilliant. I think he even added in the chat, okay, got it, grandma stories, and then he laughed, which is fantastic. Yes, we all know people who don't necessarily tell the right stories or tell them well. So it is an art and you have mastered it. So it's well worth developing leaders in our organizations who can do this right, because that's going to be an instrumental key for transformational change, correct?
Absolutely, Sonia.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Gatik. You've shared some great insight. It sounds like the chat is full of comments. There was lots of questions. If we missed your question, by the way, please feel free to go on our website and fill out the inquiry form there. Your question will go directly to Gatik and he will answer it. And this just gave you a bit of a showcase of how valuable it can be to get storytelling right and what an impact that will have on your organization. So hopefully you take that on board. Check out the Transforme Learning website for more information on that. It's one of the most important skills, obviously, to have in the 21st century, especially based on what we've seen everyone in the world go through. And I'm certainly going to apply these. I liked RSI. RSI was great. Now it's time for our final panel for the day. And as we prepare for our final panel to join us on screen, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the topic. It's a topic close to my heart: breaking the internal glass ceiling, challenging mind traps to build a gender equitable workspace. COVID-19 has had an alarming impact on women globally, with disproportionate loss of jobs, 800 billion in earnings, and burnout as they juggle their work with caregiving. While there is a shift in gender equity policies at work, organizations still have a long way to go. And this panel will examine what are some of the mind traps that impact both women and men at work. And it will explore strategies and everyday actions that people can take of every gender to build a more gender equitable workplace. Now, please join me in welcoming this stellar lineup of speakers. They are fantastic. To start with, we have Chaitra Chitanand. Chaitra is the co-founder of Salt One, at My Salt app. By the way, if you're looking it up, at My Salt app. A fintech platform that's on a mission to close the gender gap in finance. Prior to Salt, Chaitra co-founded Simple and pioneered BNPL in India. Before that, Chaitra has worked in technology, product, and business roles across AI, deep learning, digital media, and entertainment companies for the US, China, Japan, and India. Fantastic lineup. Next, we have with us Kate Croser, the Chief Executive Officer of the South Australian Film Corporation, an Emmy award-winning film and TV producer. Kate's work has been nominated for and has won Australian Academy Awards and screened at the world's most prestigious international film festivals. Such an honor to have you with us. We also have Maciej Fagasinski, the Senior Project Manager at UNHCR. So Maciej works at the Global Learning and Development Center at the UN Refugee Agency. He is a member of the Leadership Development section, being responsible for designing and delivering training on management and leadership. Again, an honor having you here. We're also excited to have on this panel Pooja Banerjee, People Manager at Google India. Pooja has close to 2 decades of experience in the HR space, has closely partnered with business leaders in driving the talent agency and organizational strategy. In her current role, she is the people partner to large business groups for Google and also leads the DEI agenda for them in India, as well as for some of their global teams. It's a huge impact on a very important topic. Moderating this Power Pack panel, we have our very own Sandra, the co-founder of Transforme. So strap yourselves in. Hopefully you're still glued to your seat. Let's see how this session goes. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sanya. Oh, I'm so super excited. This is one of my favorite topics, breaking the glass ceiling and building a gender equitable workspace. But more than that, I just want to shout out to our panelists here. I just realized we've got such an amazing panel with different experience. We've got a serial entrepreneur, we've got an Emmy and Australian Academy Award winner, we've got a UN change maker, and we've got a people leader of Fortune's best company to work for. What do you need? We've got So much of intelligence in just one room over here. Wow. And all of whom I have the privilege to know professionally and personally. So that makes me richer. Welcome all of you, and thank you so much for taking out the time for this beautiful and I think very important discussion around glass ceiling. True to Transforme Me style, I'm going to start with the inside out approach. I feel I evolved as a leader when I recognized in Gandhi's word, I had to be the change I wanted to see. In both my pregnancies, I lost new opportunities, new role opportunities, because I announced I was pregnant just before accepting the roles. The first time it shattered me, the second time it angered me. I addressed that by quitting my job, starting my own company, taking up a part-time job to sustain that company, getting myself reskilled and breastfeeding my 3-month-old baby all at the same time. And that is my first memory of shattering the glass ceiling. I'm going to start with you, Chaitra. You represent a small percentage of women entrepreneurs who have built multiple companies from scratch. I'm sure you've gone through many glass ceilings, but I want to start with what internal glass ceiling that you had to break for yourself to reach where you are today. Is there a story that stays with you in this space?
I mean, I really like the fact that you use the phrase internal glass ceiling, Sandra, because I think that's what I have had to deal with. I was, I lucked out on the lottery of birth. I was born in a family which was very supportive. Like, it was a gender neutral upbringing that I had, right? I had no idea that I was lucky enough not to have an idea that there is a difference between boys and girls growing up, and that women face so many other challenges which are externally imposed on them, starting with their own family members. And not having had that and having grown up into the real world for a very long time, I did not acknowledge that gender played any role in sort of the paths that you would take. Right now, I think in the last few years, I have come to recognize that there are a lot more nuances to this than meets the eye. And I also have come to acknowledge that the reason a lot of us don't like to think of gender playing a role is because somewhere it makes you feel a little, it makes you feel like maybe you're making an excuse. Maybe you're being weak, right? Maybe you just need to push yourself harder. But I've heard this enough and more from enough number of women that now that I no longer am in doubt that it plays a role. But I have heard from so many of my friends and colleagues who are entrepreneurs like myself, corporate leaders, etc., that they have to work, metaphorically, they say, like 10 times harder to reach the same levels of success, right? The internal glass ceiling matters a lot to me, because I think a lot of my challenges came from within my own mind. And it was basically, to put it very simply, I in my first journey into entrepreneurship, and that's where you and I met. I remember that first conversation that I had with you, where I was talking to you about this mental image that I had made of myself, right? What a good entrepreneur should be, what a good mother should be, or a good wife, friend, colleague, etc. And I always fell short of that image in my assessment, because I was just such a self-critical person. And so there was no way I was going to ever catch up to that image, because as I grew, that image also automatically, there was a permanent delta over there. And I think that's where, talking to you, I started Vipassana around the same time. I had this brilliant, one of our angel investors became my mentor. And I started reaching out and started connecting with other entrepreneurs like myself. And I realized that, this is something that a lot of us are plagued by. This, call it, there are different terms depending on the degrees of inadequacy that you feel, right? Whether it is imposter syndrome, some people call it self-doubt, some people call it something else. But all of those together really helped me break that internal glass ceiling and to shatter that mental image and accept myself for who I am, and know that, where I am, who I am, it is a great place to be. And also acknowledge that I will continue to grow and be a better version of myself every day, but not have like some kind of an artificial, image or a muse that I was trying to live up to. So yeah, that was I think my first foray into entrepreneurship through Simple was really my coming of age in that sense, as a person accepting myself for who I am and celebrating myself for who I am.
Beautiful, Chaitra, I think. And that's the reason I started with the internal glass ceiling as well, because most of the answer sometimes lies there. And I love the way you said that the delta is always there. I call it the moving goalpost. So every time you're about to reach that this is where I'll be happy or satisfied, I just push it away. We are sometimes our biggest critique. But I love the way you said you got a coach for yourself, you did some self-work, you got a mentor, and that helped you in the process of celebrating yourself and accepting yourself. And then kind of shattering that ceiling and taking towards others. Thank you. Now I want to move to the external glass ceiling, which is also very much present. And I'd like to invite Kate. Kate as somebody who's also a multi-award or winning film and television producer. You've established yourself and you've established independent production and distribution companies as well. And that path couldn't have been easy. What gender struggles have you faced and how did you overcome them?
Thank you so much, Sandra. I actually feel a lot of similarities to some of the stories that you and Chaitra have mentioned as well. And for me, probably the biggest struggles that I've faced, especially when I started out, and I was quite a young woman starting out in the film and television industry, and the biggest challenges I faced really were being underestimated. And also being outside of the networks. So the networks in Australia in film and television are very male. They've come from a background of mainly of working within, television broadcasting companies, for example. So they've kind of come from the same background. And also I felt as an outsider because of the location, because I'm based in South Australia, which is, it's separate from, it's a different location from Sydney, where the main sort of power base is for film and TV. So I had all of these ways that I felt outside of the network. And like you, Sandra, I felt I had some impact of my pregnancies that actually impacted my businesses. One of my businesses actually fell apart as a result of me getting pregnant and having a baby. So for me, I'm a very competitive person and I take all of these things as a challenge, and I really love the opportunity to show people what I can do despite the fact that they underestimate me. So I, for example, with that situation where one of my businesses fell apart after becoming pregnant, I set up a new company and that company flourished. So that sort of brings me a lot of satisfaction as well, to show people what's possible. But I think just to reference Chaitra's point about mentorship, the real positive for me has been that I absolutely can say I owe my whole career to my female mentors and the mentorship that I've had from other women that have forged a path before me. And it really is a very generous community, I think, of women in the screen industry in particular. And I'm sure that the same thing applies in other industries. And it's really a wonderful community to be part of, when we can lift each other up and help each other find a path through, and just generally support and provide that moral support and share those stories. So, it's, in fact, my first mentor in the industry actually became one of my business partners. We were watching an Ingmar Bergman film together called Persona, which is a really sort of fabulous female-driven story, and it's all about women and women's relationships. And we watched this movie together and we loved it so much that we said, let's start a company together. And that really was the start of my producing career. And something I'm very proud of through my producing career is that I've been able to really tell stories about, female characters but where their female identity also intersects with other identities that are underrepresented on our screens. So, you know, disabled women and Aboriginal women and trans women and girls, that's been a big part of my work. And I think, you know, showing those stories on our screens, as Gatik talked about in his session, you know, those stories have a lot of power to change the way that people think and to change community attitudes. So that's been a really satisfying result, I suppose, of this career journey that I've been on.
Yeah, beautiful. And Kate, I first got introduced to your work watching your movies, Top and Wedding, and your other television shows as well. And I do admire the kind of stories you make around underrepresented people. And when I do this unconscious bias sessions with people and we have pictures about who a policeman should look like or who a CEO should look like, all of that, most of it comes from movies. And so screen has such a huge role to play in also breaking that glass ceiling. And I'm quite happy looking at least some of the movies, some of the television shows that are coming that are representing all of that. So continue shining. I love that. Take that as a challenge. And sometimes it's good to be pushed down if it challenges you to go and break those ceilings, because I feel if you don't push yourself enough, you don't know where your boundaries are. And the only way to find it is keep pushing yourselves. Amazing story. Thank you, Kate. I'm going to move to looking at what organizations can do, because while we were talking about our own internal barriers and glass ceilings and also what we come across from the outside network as an outsider, Pooja, you have close to 2 decades of HR experience, partnering closely with business leaders, driving talent agenda as a full-time leader. And with the break the bias trending nowadays, what unsaid mind traps or assumptions you perceive that women could be going through at work, and how do you see we can address those unsaid assumptions or biases?
Thanks, Sandra. And I would just want to plus one what you just said in terms of just how movies influence some of our biases. I would want to say even storybooks, what we read to our children, like when we talk about the damsel in distress and the Prince Charming comes to rescue her, is that what we are teaching our kids? And I do see a change now in how our movies and our stories are changing around just getting gender equality even in the storybook. So really like that call out which you said, that yes, what we see really frames and influences our biases, our thinking. So not surprising when we go to the corporate world, we have obviously the leaders who are also influenced by those biases. And a lot of those biases play at every level. And we're all human beings. I think biases are there. I think it's critical that we're aware of our biases and we have approaches to manage those biases. Some of the most common biases which I've seen, say at a talent session or a perf session or even a regular business session, the most common biases is like a stereotyping bias or affinity bias. Like people want to see people like themselves. So they want to start looking at people if they want to give projects, who's like me, speaks like me, from my educational background. In a global company, it could also be transcending culture, somebody from a similar background, like similar race. So those are the kind of biases we typically see coming out in any kind of a forum or any kind of format. But I think what I have seen is critical is to be aware. So what we typically do is we make sure that we do regular bias busting sessions with leaders to make sure, hey, do you know that when you said something like this, it showed like you had a bias for somebody, a situational bias, like in a pandemic, is it top of mind? You did not see somebody and that person was not in your kind of reference set and you really forgot because you did not meet that person over a water cooler conversation, which you were having perhaps in the pre-pandemic time. So top of mind continues to be a bias we are watching out now, especially as we return to work, like how does that play out? And just being aware of it, calling that out, being brave to say, Mr. X, you just said that, looks like, that bias is playing out in a decision which you're making. Has been very helpful for me. So I think leaders definitely are now more aware that biases can play in these situations, but how as a leader, and not only the people leader, I think any leader in the room can call out that bias to the leaders has been an important way to bust the bias, if I could say, in many forums, and I've seen people being very self-aware now. So I think I've been fortunate to work with leaders who are authentic and are able to step back and say, yeah, looks like that is a bias. Let me think of this differently. Let me frame differently. Let me use the right choice of words. So typically for women, when we're giving projects, we ask questions like, oh, how old would she be? Would she be going on maternity soon? Those questions are not allowed to be asked because they are filled with biases. We do not need to know what's the age of the person, what background they are from. We just talk about their skills. So get the conversation back to skills, talk about their PDP conversations rather than how old are they married, etc., which used to be a lot of these conversations earlier. But in the last couple of years, I've seen that change happening where people are focusing more on skills and deliveries and what they are making impact at rather than how old they are and when are they getting married.
Yeah, I so resonate with that, Pooja. I remember initially a lot of people would ask me questions. You're traveling, who's taking care of your kids at home? And my husband travels a lot and nobody asks him that question. And but in the last couple of years, honestly, I haven't heard people asking me questions. And so I'm happy to see that those conversations are making people aware and sensitive to at least pausing and kind of checking in whether we are bringing that bias. And the proximity bias is another big one that could come in with hybrid workplace. I could just be hanging around with people around and miss people who are working from home. So great conversations around having leaders just talk about it and be aware, because we all have those biases. Talking about biases, Maciej, I know we did a lot of work in this space for the last couple of years. And I'm sure you would have resonated with some of the things that Pooja also saying. What are you designing in leadership interventions for the UN Refugee Agency? And when you're designing it, how are you building in gender sensitivity and creating safe space for people to challenge those biases?
Thanks, Sandra. And indeed, it resonates a lot with what we are doing in UNHCR. And this is quite a complex organization. It's a big one. It's 18,000 people of different backgrounds. We are working in many countries in all continents around the world. So it is a complex, very complex structure, very complex dynamic, internal and external as well, because our mandate is quite clear. We serve people, we serve persons of concern, refugees, internally displaced persons, stateless persons. So this is our top priority, to focus on them and to provide them with assistance. But also what we have to do is to look what we do internally. And definitely gender within UNHCR plays an important role. However, it's not the only element that contributes to the specific dynamics that we have. It is important in UNHCR, and it is quite related. How long have you been working for the organization? What's your age, whether you're disabled or not? What's your race? What is your location? What is your contractual status? And all of this interacts with this important factor, which is gender. So what we thought to do is to reach out to our colleagues and to ask them to stop, pause, and reflect, and find a way to brainstorm, to discuss together with us those important issues. And we build a training that is currently delivered fully online. And within this training, we meet with our colleagues. We create a safe space, a space where we can discuss unconscious bias, where we can discuss power dynamics, where we can discuss psychological safety and the role of psychological safety, and also other things, quite difficult things like harassment, microaggression, all those difficult topics. And through that, we would like to, first of all, reach out to our leaders, reach out to our managers, and to cascade this throughout the organization. So we would like to discuss with them what's their role, how their behavior impacts themselves, but also how their behavior impacts their fellow team members, their colleagues, why they behave like this. So when we discuss gender, for example, in the impact of gender on our behavior, we use this tool, which is called a fishbowl. We call it a gender fishbowl. And within this exercise, we discuss with our participants how gender influence their past, how gender influence the current situation, and how gender will influence the future. So we try to go throughout all those 3 steps, past, current situation, and future, just to let them think and let them reflect where they are, who they are, and what role they play. We also have specific sessions that are related to gender, specifically to gender in the workplace. And within this session, we also try to create this space for self and group reflection on unconscious biases and practice that all managers have, and how they impact on psychological safety, how they impact on trust, how they impact on the ways we work with our colleagues. And we notice that this, I would say, open space for discussion, we often don't rush. We try to find time to discuss all those things. We don't have talking heads. We try to have group discussions. And all of this really impacts on our colleagues and allows them to basically stop, pause, and reflect and change their behavior. And I just want to quote one extremely, I found it very nice feedback that we got from one of our participants, and it is a poem. I will just quote a couple of lines, but I think it's quite strong what we received from this colleague. I must admit that I have come a long way. I'm not the woman I was 3 months ago today. I have changed and I am more positive about my day. I see my team in a different light, carrying out conversation and not a fight. And I think it really shows that the way we address, the way we try to engage with our leaders and to foster safe space and to foster to create the space for a discussion about gender and the role of gender really pays off. And we are keen to continue. It's an ongoing process. We cannot stop now. We have started, but definitely we are going to continue delivering various training to our colleagues.
I love the poem, Maciej, and partnering with you for the last 2 years, I could understand the kind of emotions that people come up with. There's one small trivia I do want to share. We talk about labeling and removing labels from people, from society, from different backgrounds. We also need to look at what labels we put in our programs. And I loved what you do is you don't call it an unconscious bias session or a psychological safe session or diversity session. You call it reflective leadership dialogues. And that's what it is. It is a leadership dialogue. We don't need to call it specifically diversity or sexual harassment or anything, but it is part of a leadership mandate. And all of this is included as much as high performance and how do you tell stories and how do you coach people? How do you create this space? So I wanted to call that out as well, is how we programming it and messaging in the organization as well, and not creating a separate label for something like that. Thank you for sharing that story, Maciej. I want to now kind of move to Kate, maybe. As you've shared that you've grown from the ranks, being one of the young screen maker, feeling as an outsider, to now the CEO of the South Australian Film Corporation has been an amazing journey for you. Now that you are in that position, what can you say, or what are the steps that leaders can take to create a more inclusive or gender balanced C-suite or executive management or get equal chairs on that table?
Well, for me, it really has to start at the top. And for me, it's about board representation and ownership of companies. And so I really believe that when you have a diverse and gender balanced board, you're much more likely to create a culture in your organization that is going to attract strong talent. And it's going to attract that talent and it's going to retain that talent. especially, you know, female talent or people from underrepresented or diverse backgrounds. So that's the best way to tap into that huge talent pool that's so underutilized in our world. And it's also, I think, the way to address the biases or the biases that happen, you know, at the level where recruitment happens. Is that board representation. The other thing I've really noticed is that in the screen industry, you know, it's such a, the company ownership structures are so male dominated. So for me, female entrepreneurship is a really big part of this. And it's a sort of a generational change that we want to see. But I am fortunately in a position where, working for the South Australian government, I can actually, you know, create policy and support structures to enable, you know, greater support for female entrepreneurs. And I think that's where we've got ahead in terms of the future of leveling the playing field and evening out that balance.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know you're also a member of the board of the South Australian Leaders for Gender Equity. And good on you, Kate. I mean, you struggled your way up and now you're in a position where you can light the torch and, you know, throw in a ladder to help a lot of other maybe struggling women leaders in the screen industry. Kudos, and I'll always be championing you when watching all your movies from here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to move to, since we're talking about women and women supporting women, I'm going to go to Chaitra, because Chaitra, you have a very interesting, your latest venture, Salt, is very interesting, a fintech platform where you've created a firm with a mission to close the gender gap in finance. That's interesting. And that's another bias we sit with, you know, finance usually in our head are usually male dominated. So what's the story that led you to pick up such a niche space?
Sandra, that's the thing. Money is just not niche. It flows through all of our lives, right? And I think most of us are anchored to the earning of money only. And that's where you look at any report that any, you know, government does or UN does, it's all focused on the earning of money. And when it comes to earning of money, there's a very small percentage of women who actually earn money through salaried jobs, right? And that's what we've been talking about, changing that. But one thing that these reports miss out is there's a huge informal economy when it comes to women. And that informal economy can be divided into two parts. One is the obvious micro entrepreneurs, freelancers, you know, people who like home entrepreneurs, people who do things on the side and they have a cash flow that they generate for themselves. And then, of course, you have the second entire, a little more controversial, non-mainstream idea that, you know, women as homemakers are also creating economic value. And there needs to be a number put to that, right? And the way it manifests in real life is whether you're earning either through a salary, through entrepreneurship, or you're a homemaker, all women control money. And women inherently are savers. They're very attuned to saving. Today, they're saving and storing, and they're not putting that money to work. Right? So when you save and store, and with all the changes that are happening in the world, inflation being the most basic and the power of compounding being the most abstract, which you don't think about. So deploying that money that you're already saving and storing, and, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're earning it, whether, you know, it's a budget given to you by the primary earning member in your household, or it's your freelance income, that's your pocket money, but you can do something with it. And you have, at least in India, right, and in Bangladesh, you have seen the power of, through microfinance in the poorer sections of society, you've seen the transformation that has happened in that entire layer of the pyramid by when women take charge of money. The impact is just mind-blowing because inherently they end up focusing on, they prioritize their children's education. I have seen this firsthand because my parents grew up in villages in Karnataka and they are still connected to the village. Like my father's elder brother is still a farmer in one of the villages in Karnataka. So we go back a lot. So my mother helped a group of women create the self-help group there about 25 years back. And it was a group of 15 women, and they came together to save 10 rupees every week. Like 10 rupees is about 10 cents almost every week, right? So that was all they were saving. And 25 years later, all those women, their children, my mother's cousin's wife, who was the one she helped, she has 3 kids, 2 daughters and 1 son. One of them is a software engineer in the US. The daughter just graduated from a master's program in Germany, and she's currently working at Apple. Another daughter works for BMW in Bangalore. And you talk to that lady, my aunt, and you see how much that 10 rupees and that context of that bringing together a group of 15 women in the context of money transformed their lives. Wow. So the husbands became more responsible, the power balance in the house shifted, they had more of a say, equity, right? Equity, which is what you talk about. Equity happened, and it happens through money. So I think, that's the reason we call ourselves SALT, is because we think that women, money are essential ingredients in life and in society, and both are invisible but when they go missing in food, when salt is missing, that's when you realize, oh, something is wrong, right? You don't, in your recipe books, they don't tell you how much salt to measure and put, they always say salt to taste. Money is like that. There is an intuition associated with money. And these women that I'm talking about, they were rural women. Within a few months, they figured out how to keep the books. They started with 1 ledger, they went on to the 2nd, 3rd ledger. So effectively, and I almost failed my accounting exam at Stanford. That was how I hated accounting. And I saw these women figure out a triple balance ledgering system with annotation. So it's, in financial terminologies, that's what it's called, right? So there's actually a lot more intuition in money than we realize. So SALT is on a mission to bring intuition back to money. It's what I like to think of as the deindustrialization of finance. And of course, we are focused on women and we distribute to them, but we are open to all. I joke about this. I say that we are inclusive to men. So everybody is welcome to use SALT. And yeah, it's mainly because of the importance that money plays in our lives.
I love it. And that takes so much of astuteness to pick up that, like salt, it was invisible, how women are managing finance. It's in front of us and yet we can't see it. And for you to pick that up and bring it up mainstream, take it to new age fintech, and then giving them the power back to use it more intelligently, it's super amazing. Yeah. All the best. May your salt continue to grow. As an essential, as an essential nutrient in our food. I wish that it continues to grow in our society as well. Beautiful. Okay, I'm thinking of getting some tips and steps, and I know that some of our audiences are from the HR and learning and development space, Maciej. And since you've done a lot of work in gender equitable workspace, what can we, and doesn't need to be HR and L&D, but what would you suggest as strategies and everyday actions for people that they can take at their work to make it more equitable for everyone? And let's go beyond gender, let's say diversity and inclusiveness. What can they do to make workplace more inclusive?
So first of all, we talk about being active. So we are telling to our participants, to our learners, that you are agents of change. So it doesn't matter what's your rank, what's your position, whether you are a middle manager or a top manager in our organization, you have inner power, you have other types of power, and through that, you can change your work environment. And you are agent of change. This is what we really highlighting throughout our learning programs. And because you are an agent of change, you need to be active, you need to take different actions. Hence, we are not talking, for example, about being a bystander, but being an upstander. So to act, to react, to be involved in addressing certain challenging workplace situations. We're also talking about being an ally. And this could be done through formal channels and through informal channels. So for example, within UNHCR, we have an informal group which is called Men for Change. And this is a discussion group. Each and every colleague within the organization can join this group to discuss various issues related to gender also, but also diversity and inclusion, and how men could support various changes in our organization. There is a series of barbershop sessions, and these are facilitated sessions where various top leaders are also being involved, and issues related to gender, issues related to fostering a safe environment are being discussed during these sessions. But also, what is important to our organization is that we really we are action-driven when it comes to supporting persons of concern. So people that we serve, and often we forgot about ourselves. So what we're also trying to encourage our leaders and managers to do is to focus on well-being of, or your own well-being, but also well-being of your team. And we are saying that, yes, we are agents of change, but we are not superheroes. And we need to find time to talk about our vulnerabilities. We are, as I said, we are working often in very difficult locations, and we are working with desperate people who are fleeing their homes because they are not feeling safe. And this has an impact on us. We cannot just forget about it, and we cannot put it aside. We need to discuss it. We need to show our vulnerability, and we as leaders within the organization should be open to it, and we should promote it. As I said, we are agents of change, not superheroes, and we need to really take this into account. And this is what we do. This is what we discuss with our learners. This is what we try to promote throughout our learning programs related to leadership and management.
I love that, Maciej. I know you talk about, getting people to bring out their own inner power. It doesn't talk about role and responsibility, but your own power to, upstand and say things that you feel that's not right. But one thing that missed is each one of you are actually working with people who are in a situation, who could be at a stateless situation. And so at that time, you don't feel that your challenges are important and you kind of suppress it. And that sometimes can lead to toxic behavior as well in organization, like, this is not important to talk about, look who you're dealing with. But yes, it's important. We're all vulnerable, no matter what position we are in. And it's important to share what you're feeling. I think that's a good stepping point. In the last panels, we talked about transparency and fairness. Bringing that in organization gives staff power to go towards that purpose. So brilliant recommendations. I love the barber. I love the man for change, bringing a little bit of curiosity and fun element and creating that space for people to have those conversations. Thank you, Maciej. Lastly, I'm going to move to Pooja. And I know, Pooja, you've been donning not just the HR hat, but also the very important hat, and the whole world is kind of focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know you're leading that agenda for Google, who's also known to be a very progressive organization. How do you make inclusion real? And what are the critical first steps for, say, a new organization that's looking at starting off a DEI agenda? What would you say would be the first critical steps that they need to look at to start that kind of journey?
Thanks, Sandra. And I'm loving the discussion. It's really inspiring. So thank you so much for having me again. On this particular question, I think inclusion just doesn't play at one level, irrespective of you're starting a new organization or you're an evolved organization. I think inclusion really plays at several levels. If you really want to make it real, it has to happen at several places in the organization. So I'll start at the top. So leadership at the top, the tone at the top is very, very important. That sets really the culture, that gets the ball rolling. And by this, I don't mean the HR leader or the DI leader. I mean the entire leadership team in terms of how do they show up in terms of inclusion, how authentic are they? So I think a lot of stories, narrations from the leadership team is very important for the teams or the organizations to understand why inclusion is important for the leadership team. And that's really setting the climate of inclusion in the organization. But the most critical lever, which I think I've seen in the last 20 years to make inclusion real, is our manager group, because a lot of stuff happens at the ground level. That's when the rubber hits the road. You can have your best policy, your best framework, your best measurements, but if you do not have managers who are able to take it to your employees, it all fails there. So we've done a lot of effort and continue to do a lot of effort in enabling our manager groups, talking to them about what inclusion means. And this is not just about gender inclusion or URGs, but also inclusion of thoughts, diversity of ideas. How do you get different perspectives to be valued in the organization? I think all of that fosters progression, fosters retention. I mean, you just don't want to get in people, but you also have to make sure that they grow and they thrive in your organization. So what we've done a lot is building on managerial capability, and we've engaged with external partners, internal partners, making sure that there is peer-to-peer learning happening between the managers to understand how they can drive inclusion in their team. Simple stuff. When you're designing an offsite, is it inclusive for everyone in your team? It's just not about giving the right ratings. It's just not about hiring. When you're giving projects to everyone in your team, is it equitable? It's not about being equal. Is it equitable? Are you making sure that you're enabling the people with the right skill sets to deliver? I mean, how successful are people in your team is a manager's accountability. We measure that through various pulse surveys, feedbacks, open groups, which keep happening, but that's just the output. But I think the lead indicators are we enabling our manager group to be able to lead as inclusive leaders on the ground? And that's what you've seen really shift the needle for us in driving a full culture change across the organization. So while we can have a lot of training programs at a global level, but what really matters is on the ground at the grassroots level, the frontline managers, how well do they understand? What are we doing to invest in their capability to be able to drive inclusion at a micro level in the team? And that cascades across the organization. You're on mute, Sandra.
I'm so sorry. Beautiful, Pooja. I hear a lot of people talking about change starting from top down. And while that is true, change starts from top down. But actually the real change makers are somewhere in the middle that's dealing with, everyday decisions, challenges, firefighting. And if you've got that huge army on board, it makes a huge difference. You move much faster. Thanks for those tips, really helpful. In fact, there were so many great ideas that I picked up from all four of you, and starting with internal barriers, having the courage, breaking your own glass ceiling, no matter how tough you feel the situation is, moving forward, and then doing things now that we all have power. And I feel all of us here in this panel do have that power to make the difference and change for people around us in our organization and community. And it's good to hear some great ideas. I feel inclusion is a skill that takes courage, it takes empathy, and most of all, it takes practice. And with practice of reflection, of checking in with ourselves, it's not about getting it right all the time, but it's about just continuing to do it. And that's most critical when we look at creating an inclusive workspace.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to check if there are any questions for us from the group.
There are. Firstly, thank you so much for hosting, Sandra. You started the right questions. You evoked a lot of conversation in the chat, so you're very good at this. And of course, the panel for sharing all of your insights. Brilliant session. What a way to share insight on such an important day for us. Now, there is a question that's just appeared in our chat. We'll start with that one before we summarize. Thank you, Salman, for this question. What about the glass ceiling? Now, it is a long question, so I will read it and hopefully you can interpret. What about the glass ceiling that C-level creates for middle management to snub creativity and abiding by the through process of theirs? Or else the final phrase that we should not cling along any further. Thank you so much for your services. As a monarchy culture, not everyone, especially in the mid-career crises, can go for starting their own business.
I'm just looking at the panel. Is there anyone who'd like to take that up?
It was a little bit of a convoluted question, but hopefully you can address some of it, especially the part about the glass ceiling that C-levels create for middle management to snub creativity. Perhaps if you could start there.
I can take a shot at it and maybe others can add. I think it's just not at the C-level or the middle level. I think if you have to break the ceiling, you need to start at whichever stage of your career you are at. I think it's very important to be brave and be uncomfortable. And I think starting your own business, to what Sandra said, I think it's for all of us, even in the corporate world. You'll always have a lot of challenges, people who will try and say that this opportunity did not belong to you for various reasons, and biases will play out. I think what I have learned in these last 20 years, that the most important skill is resilience and being brave. It's important to be uncomfortable. Raise your hand for opportunities which you think you may not be great at, because women are very good at having gremlins in their mind and having imposter syndrome. But how do you break from your imposter syndrome and raise your hand and get into situations where you think you may not be good at? So it's okay to fail. Do ordinary things in extraordinary ways. That's what is most important. And I think that's the journey one needs to be at from the beginning. You can't suddenly start changing your style at the middle level, because you have to break barriers at every level if you are looking at a 20-30 year stint for yourself. So I think being brave and being uncomfortable is really critical, and raising your hand often is the key, which I felt has been successful so far.
Fantastic answer to that. I think what they were alluding to in this question is that perhaps at a C-level and middle management, they're kind of siloed and separate, and it can be hard to bridge some of those gaps, especially when implementing this change. So hence abiding by the thought process of a C-level. So does anyone else have some insight for how to bridge the gap between siloed levels of management that might not see eye to eye on these kind of topics?
I just want to add one bit over here, and this line about not everyone in mid-career crisis can go starting on their own business. And it's not about starting your own business. That's an extreme step if you think of it. And that shouldn't stop us, to what Pooja was saying, to at least making an attempt of speaking up and being an upstander and having the conversation. I don't know whether we have one of the attendees here, and she's a senior leader in an organization, and she shared a story that she was an HR leader in an organization. She saw something happening wrong at the C-level, and she raised her hand, knowing very clearly that it could go against her, and it did. It did go against her. She lost her job. There was even a lawsuit that she had to fight for years. And today she says, I have no regrets doing that, because I need to look at myself in the mirror, and I have to live with the person in the mirror for the rest of my life. So, and I did what I felt right. And so it's all worth it. So at the end of the day, of course, it's your decision. You need to see what works for you, what's your environment, and how do you need to, you don't need to go immediately bang on with your armor and say, yeah, I'm going to take a fight. Are there other ways to look at it? Can you get influencers to go with you? Can you look at different forums to have conversation, and just reach out and find ideas how to make that happen versus just accepting? Those are my 2 bits around this.
Thank you so much for contributing. Absolutely love that, Sandra. And we did have another question that came up on our LinkedIn Live, Jagriti. Women are still primary caregivers. With women taking up full-time careers, it has put them in a situation of jeopardy that they have been unable to fulfill their roles personally and professionally. How can an organization help women balance their roles till the definition of caregiver becomes gender-free?
I have a thought on this, which has been, with me for many, many years. And I think inclusion, and especially this pertaining to this question, an organization can start with the men, because it comes down to what is acceptable. Biases start from what is acceptable and not acceptable at work. And I feel that a lot of focus is on giving women flexibility. But I think if they can also start by giving men flexibility and get the men to avail the flexibility that is being offered to them, if it's not enough to just have policies that say you have paternity leave, or just make sure. I think it's about normalizing men participating in childcare. That's where, to me, balance will come from. It's by men stepping up, men stepping in, organizations making it normal for men to talk about these types of conversation, to say that, hey, I need to take a break because I need to take care of my wife, she's unwell today. I need to take a break because I need to show up for my child's parent teachers meeting, whatever it may be, right? And I know different cultures have different levels of sort of shame around this sometimes. So I think if that can be broken down, and start with the men.
That's an interesting perspective, especially since the question had a little part at the end there that said, until the definition of caregiving becomes gender-free. A quick question, do you think that responsibility of redefining lies with leaders?
Of course.
So it's 100%. A top.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Now, they were the questions we did have on our chat, and I might invite Gatik, if you're still around, if you don't mind jumping in as well. We'd love your perspective. We just talked, Chaitra just talked about the perspective from men as well, and how redefining that could really be driven by leadership. So could you also put in some thoughts of your own?
I think it's a fascinating topic, and I can't claim to be an expert on it by far. I'm still learning. And I think this last couple of years in Transforme, working with Sandra in her building out the diversity and inclusion program. First of all, the thing I'm going to start off with is that 3 years back, 3-4 years back, it started opening my eyes to what are some of the things that I was doing. And I still am doing. I don't think I've overcome it completely, but I think there's a huge sense of awareness now, which goes back to what Pooja spoke about, that we've got to start with a level of awareness. And many years back, so one of our colleagues, Amita, who's heads our marketing, and she's behind organizing this event. She runs another company which is about gender neutral toys and products for kids, right? And she had interviewed Sandra and me many years back and talking about how we're raising our 2 daughters. And for us, it's been a way of life in the way we talk to both our daughters. And I think the point I'm making is that, because for my daughters, for example, climbing trees and playing with dolls is as important as learning how to fix a table and to how to have a nail into the wall kind of a thing. And the point I'm trying to make is, I guess awareness is really critical, number one, and it has to seep beyond the workplace. It's not just at the workplace, it's at the community level that these conversations need to happen. We all start believing what we see and hear. That's the truth. We believe what we see and hear. We've just got to start showing people what they need to see and hear. And that's on all of us, whether internally in the organization or externally. So that's my 2 cents on this, Sanya.
Brilliant, brilliant.
I wanted to add one bit on this, Sanya. I think, and a lot of it, adding to whose responsibility it is, a lot of it is socialized into us for generations. I also feel it's women's responsibility as well to let go. Sometimes we hold on to the caregiving so much, and we want to control, or at least want to influence everything around caregiving, especially for our kids, that we actually sometimes don't even give our partners the opportunity to take the lead and do that bit. So I think the conversation needs to start at home. Firstly, is if you want caregiving to be gender neutral, start it by having those conversations. Start asking your partner to, or at least working on something to co-contribute, especially if you're also working. and then take the conversations also to work and have that conversation collective, because if we have conversations all over the place happening, change will happen. And then hopefully we get into the space of salt where it becomes invisible, and then we don't need to have that kind of conversation. But yes, learn to let go and share those responsibilities as well.
Absolutely. That's such great insight to finish on, Sandra. And perhaps that's an encouragement for everybody in the room and everybody on LinkedIn Live who's watching this. Take these conversations home. And perhaps if it starts in home and it starts in your organization, especially from your leaders, then that's where we'll start seeing incremental change that will positively impact your company. Thank you so much, panelists. What an incredible session. I've got some really good things that came out of that. Pooja, when you started, you were talking about telling the story at a young age and how that influences our biases. It's our responsibility to break these cycles and biases to young children and to women around us. So just being acutely aware of the kind of things that we're cycling that was just learned deeply in inherited behaviors and conversations and assumptions, and breaking them as young as possible. I love the idea and the challenge around that. Maciej as well, I love that you have training for managers on reflective leadership, and it's a vital part in developing an equitable workspace. And the 3 words you used: stop, pause, and reflect. And I think that is great learning for everybody in the room. Kate, you talked about film. Obviously, you're in such a prime position. It's what an honor it is, where film plays such a great role in telling stories that can genuinely inspire real change. So well done for flying that flag so well and representing South Australia especially so well. Well done. Sandra and Kate, when you first started, you opened with a session talking about pregnancy. I can relate. I am in my 3rd trimester of my pregnancy right now, and I am already facing so many of those challenges around clients who are delaying projects for at least a year on assumptions and biases that I won't be able to deliver on work. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I didn't know what I didn't know until I heard you sharing these stories. So there's such a long way to go to normalize what a gender-free caregiver really is. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. It's really inspired me for my pregnancy journey and keeping my business afloat. So this is a fantastic opportunity to encourage everyone, whatever thought-provoking moment you had today, to use our link that's been shared in our chat to engage further with our panelists. If you had questions that didn't get addressed, please fill out the web form on that webpage and it will be directed to the panelist and directly answered for you. But what an inspiring day. What an inspiring session, a great event, such a clear message to enable us to rise together. Now, having heard all of these pieces come together, hopefully it makes sense why we were talking about this being our overall theme. The theme for our 10th anniversary, truly believing that each of us can take something back for ourselves from the diverse set of sessions we've just heard today. And oops, let me just page on there. There you go. And if there was something here that has stood out for you, let's make sure it's not something that we heard somewhere, inspired us for a time, but let's take action. That's the point of coming out of events like this, is not just hearing an inspirational story, but actually taking the action that's going to have a positive impact on a generation in our workplaces. Right from Vineet, starting with a Keynote and listening to the inspiring stories of Transforme. That dinner table story was a good one. And the micro session on storytelling, and of course the 2 panels challenging us to really make a change. This is why we said you'd be glued to your seats, and I sure hope you were. On behalf of Transforme, this very exciting day of learning and insights, a thank you to all of our speakers for making time to impact the generation of people watching here. And if it's taken up by somebody and implemented in their organization, that'll have a cascading effect. So we really appreciate your insight and thank you for joining us. Sandra and Gatik, would you like to reflect before we close?
I just want to add a few things, and I know Sandra would want to close. I just want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists, all of our speakers who've been so gracious in giving us your time. We know you're extremely busy people, different time zones. So first of all, a huge thank you to all of you for taking out your time and being part of our celebration. It means a lot to us. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I also want to take a moment for a few acknowledgements. I want to, first of all, thank you, Sanya, for emceeing this event so beautifully. And not just that, for helping us in the last minute. Some of you may not know, we reached out to Sanya in a moment of crisis saying, hey, we've got some issue happening. We need your help. And Sanya, you were so gracious in accepting it, and such a wonderful job you've done. Thank you so much. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just so overwhelmed with the kind of conversations we've had. It's just amazing. I feel so full. I feel so powerful right now. I feel we can all rise together. Thank you, Sanya. I second Gatik for the last minute jump in and doing this, stitching this whole story together so beautifully today. I know you talked about our storytelling, but you've done it so beautifully today. And I just can't imagine the speakers we have today. I remember when Amita made and this is a personal story, Amita and Jagriti had made this creative with all the 12 speakers, the 10 speakers. And I told Amita, I'm feeling so emotional right now. I cannot imagine all of them saying yes and coming and volunteering the time, sharing the insights, and having that kind of conversation for us and celebrating our big 10 years. So I'm really, really grateful. I just feel so blessed to be in this space, working with all of you, bringing that bit of magic in our lives. And I wish, and for all the attendees, everyone who came, who glued to their seats or who've been standing, thank you so much for all the comments. Our tribe, our team members, and the community, thank you everyone. It's just, all of you just give us more passion and more power to go continue doing this work of enabling change and enabling growth. Deepest gratitude to all of you and much love. May we all rise together.
Absolutely fantastic. And on that note of all rising together, go out there, make that positive change, take this on board, and let's all collectively be transformers for our organizations. Thank you again for joining us, and you'll see a slide where you can engage with us further and find out more about what Transforme does. If anything has inspired you here, keep in mind it will probably inspire other organizations you work with, and it's our responsibility to spread this. So have a great day. Thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event soon.